program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the Eau Claire Area School Board. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire School Board. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are we in compliance with the open meetings law for today's meeting?
Yes, we are.
Okay, could we have a roll call, please, for verification of quorum?
Commissioner Bika? Here. Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle?
Here.
Commissioner Harder?
Here.
Commissioner Klinkhammer?
Here.
Commissioner Luganbill?
Here.
Commissioner Torres?
Here.
Commissioner Vu?
Here. Okay, first up on our agenda is the superintendent's report. Dr. Hardebeck.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to review the upcoming school board events. On October 9th, the LEAP committee will meet at 4 p.m. in the administration building. On October 18th, Demographic Trends and Facility Planning Council will meet at 4:30 p.m. at the administration building. October 22nd, Policy and Governance will meet at 8:45 a.m. and it will be followed by the school board meeting at 7 p.m. in the administration building. And on October 23rd, from 1 to 2:30 p.m., the Budget Development Committee will meet here in the administration building. So tonight we have some recognitions to do, and the first one I would like to do is for Ellen Higley, and she's here, standing right there in front. We want to congratulate her because she's been selected as the 2018-19 School Social Worker of the Year. And the selection was made by the Wisconsin School Social Worker Association. Ellen was nominated by her colleagues for this award, including fellow social workers, former graduate students, school counselors, school psychologists, and principals. Ellen was nominated because of the positive impact that she's had on the profession of school social workers during her long career in the Eau Claire Area School District. And just to name a few, she's been connecting with families for long-term positive change through multiple generations. She continues to expand the profession of school social work by working with numerous graduate students. And, of course, she has been a role model, mentor, and colleague for so many school social workers in our area. So, congratulations, Ellen. We're so proud of you. State Superintendent Tony Evers has proclaimed October 15th through the 19th as National School Lunch Week. The district joins in recognizing the significant contributions of school nutrition staff and the importance of a nutritious, well-balanced school lunch to the health, well-being, and education of our children. And a special thank you goes out to all our food service staff members. So congratulations on that. And then tonight we have a celebration, recognition of some of our business partners. Each year the school district and the school board, more importantly, nominates a number of business partners in our community for special recognition through WASB. And this year we had 5 of our businesses selected, and I think we have some representatives here tonight to accept their recognitions. And we're going to start with Grace Lutheran Communities. And are the representatives here? If you could come up. Grace Lutheran Communities has partnered with the Eau Claire Area School District to initiate a certified nursing assistant youth apprenticeship program for our students. This partnership includes a coordination with UW Eau Claire Upward Bound program, making the program an example of how Grace Lutheran communities and the Eau Claire Area School District are working to be inclusive and to ensure that opportunities are provided to students from all backgrounds. And this is one of our post-secondary experiences for students, and we're very grateful for the opportunities that you provide to them. We also want to recognize Reality Works. It's another one of our partnerships that fosters post-secondary success for students. Reality Works has a long-standing partnership with the Eau Claire Area School District. They provide opportunities for students to work as engineers, thus enabling students to learn industry standards, time management, problem solving. In addition, and perhaps most importantly, students learn how to leverage creativity and technology to design or test innovative products. Our ECASD students have had the opportunity to help design products that are eventually manufactured for sale. These students were recently invited to demonstrate some of these products for the governor when he visited North High School in January, and we are very, very grateful for your support. Thank you. Our next business partner is Metropolis Action City. Metropolis Resort Action City partners with the Eau Claire Area School District in several meaningful ways. Safety Patrol students from elementary schools from across the district attend a celebration of their work at Action City at the end of every year. This event helps to recognize and reward students for their conscientious work in helping to put in place safety plans for the schools. As a district, we are striving to build a culture of safety and student ownership. Action City gives our school district a partner rate for this event, helping the annual event to be sustainable. Metropolis Resort Action City also provides youth apprenticeship on the job, hands-on opportunities for students interested in pursuing a career in hospitality management. So once again, helping us to promote those post-secondary experiences for students while they're still in high school. Thank you very much. Our next partner is the Chippewa Valley Home Builders Association. And the Chippewa Valley Home Builders Association represents hundreds of construction and construction-related businesses in our area. In order to extend work-based learning experience to our students, the Chippewa Valley Home Builders Association coordinates youth apprenticeship applications in carpentry, electrical work, electrician, and plumbing. The association works to find a fit for each student with an employer in their area of interest. And this attention to detail ensures that each student has the best possible experience while working in the construction and project development aspects of construction. So again, another post-secondary experience. We're very, very grateful for your support. And finally, we have the Wisconsin Restaurant Association. They were not able to be here with us tonight, but we did want to recognize them. The association has given countless hours to partnering with ECASD to improve the culinary classrooms in the district. The association's continued work has helped us to evaluate plans, strategize for fundraising, and to support our students' diverse needs as we work to provide industry-related education to our students who are interested in careers in the culinary field. So we're sorry they couldn't be with us, but we want to thank them anyway.
Maybe right in front of this.
And that concludes my report for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hardebeck. And thank you to those businesses and so many others who help us do our work as a school district. First, I want to, I'm not sure, is our new Leader Telegram reporter here? Yes, you are. Okay, so we have a new Leader Telegram reporter, Sammy West, and she's replacing our outgoing reporter, Lauren French. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to publicly thank Lauren for her great reporting that she's done for our district. In a time when sometimes folks demonize reporters and the journalism profession, I think it's very important that we always recognize the media's role as a pillar of our democracy, starting at the local level. So thanks for your important work, and welcome to the team, and we're looking forward to working with you. Today is Indigenous Peoples Day in the Eau Claire Area School District. It's a day to honor the traditions, culture, and history of Native Americans. The history of Eau Claire and Wisconsin started with Native American tribes who made their homeland in this area. Native Americans and their traditions inspired the ideals of self-governance and determination that are the framework of our country. And Native Americans have made significant contributions in agriculture, science, medicine, music, language, art, the list goes on. So I want to thank the 3 North Star Middle School students who advocated for the inclusion of this holiday last year. It's also important to note that we have a law in Wisconsin, Act 31, which requires instruction in the history, culture, and tribal sovereignty of the federally recognized tribes and bands in the state of Wisconsin, in our public schools and in our teacher education programs. So I just wanted to raise awareness about that. I'm excited to share our success at a recent meeting in Madison of the State Policy Committee for the School Boards Association, where all of our proposals move forward in some form. I also want to follow up from our work session. Updates to our board committee policy are being drafted. A board governance workflow will be started soon and shared with you. And we have ordered books from the 2 governance models that we'll be able to read through each of them and share those. I also want to just share, we'll have a little bit later just a brief mention of the proclamation recognizing Dyslexia Awareness Month. And I know that board members received an update about services for students with dyslexia, and this is of course an important topic to raise awareness of, as 1 in 5 students have dyslexia in some form in the United States, which equates to about 174,000 public school students across Wisconsin and about 2,200 public school students right here in Eau Claire. So it's just an important piece to raise awareness of. And finally, I want to pay tribute to Lloyd Joyle, who died last week at the age of 85. He was a longtime educator in our community who served on the school board from 1996 until 2005. He was known as a people person as well as a great advocate for public education and for all children, and he will be dearly missed. So on behalf of the district, I would like to send our condolences and warm wishes to Lloyd's family and loved ones. We have a card which I'll pass around to board members, and we're also going to be sending flowers to his wife as well. So that concludes my board president's report, and I'll pass this around if you want. And that brings us now to our public forum. You will have up to 3 minutes to speak in the public forum tonight, and we'll have a 30-minute period for that. It's normally 4 minutes, but because we have 10 signed up to keep within the 30-minute, we'll do 3 minutes, unless if board members wish to suspend the rules to extend the period. So if any board member would like to do that, but okay. So we'll have 3 minutes for everyone who'd like to come up, for the folks who've signed up, and you're open to speak about whatever topic you would like to speak on to the board, provided that you're not mentioning individual employees in your comments. So first on our list is Brian Perrell. And then when you come up, just speak to the microphone. The light's already on, and just state your name and address, please.
Okay, my name is Brian Perrell. I live at 1817 Lehman Street in Eau Claire. I have taught in our district here for 23 years now, and my wife has been teaching also in this district for 26 years. Our 2 sons here both go to one of our fine elementary schools. And I'm here to speak with you tonight about my concerns with possible changes to the OPEB policies. During our nearly 50 years of combined experience, my wife and I have given our all to the students of this district. We've worked hard and tirelessly to build strong, trusting relationships with our students, knowing it was the best way to reach them and make a positive impact in not only their lives but their schooling as well. We both love what we do. But as you know, this profession can drain a person both physically, mentally, and emotionally. On those occasions when we have discussed our future in retirement, we've agreed that the time for us to retire will be when we can no longer fulfill our jobs as we have in the past, physically and mentally. We believe that it would be best for our students to leave at that time. That would be what's best for them. Your decisions as a board can greatly impact my family here. Will we have health insurance when we need it? Will we be able to choose when we retire, or will that decision taken from us? Meaning, will we be forced to continue working well beyond the time we can physically, emotionally, or mentally handle it? Is that what's best for our students? Will we need to take our experience elsewhere to look for work, which is something I can tell you we do not want to do. Since 1993, when my wife was hired, and 1996 when I was hired, we've been promised that the district would look after us in our retirement. Because of those promises, many salary increases have been foregone in lieu of insurance packages throughout our history here. Will this school board keep the promises made to us and our colleagues? If not, how will that affect the trust between your employees and the school board? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next up is Mike Poplinski.
Hi, I'm Mike Poplinski. I live at 3314 Leslie Lane. President Luganville and members of the school board, thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. My wife and I have been employees of the Eau Claire School District for 20 years, not only as classroom teachers, but as coaches in the district. Our two children spent their K-12 education in this district, working with many great teachers along the way. The issue of changing OPEB, as some of your employees, was first brought to the school board at a presentation in April. At that time, the presentation shared what was being recommended by the OPEB committee. They were going to meet with staff during the last 6 weeks of the school year last year, share the information, and then bring it back to you for a vote. I appreciate Commissioner Harder and others for pushing pause on this issue, as it certainly was not something to rush through. After that meeting, summer listening sessions were offered to the employees. A one-page handout of what benefits would look like was given to each employee. The sheets showed scenarios A, B, and C. What wasn't included was an understanding of what our current benefits through OPEB would be if changes weren't made. At this summer session, I asked if option D could be included, a do nothing option, and the answer was no, that it was a simple formula to figure out our current benefits. My frustration that I have is the lack of transparency that this committee has had with the employees of the district, more specifically our veteran employees, those who've been with us for many years. I followed up this statement with an email to the OPEB committee asking a similar question. It was stated, and a slide was added for employees to calculate their own benefits, but we wouldn't be able to see a printout of these benefits side by side. I believe that your employees would benefit from seeing the current benefits right next to scenarios A, B, and C, yet the committee refuses to do so. Again, I wish the issue was more transparent for your employees. The summer slideshow included a slide titled Pros to the District. This slide included a change would be sustainable, equitable, among other things. One thing that wasn't included in the Pros to the District slide was a cost of savings to the district. While this savings is presented as a larger number, if we realize this money is saved over 25 to 30 years, it really is a small percentage of the overall district budget. Creating any percentage of savings to the district is a good thing, but at what cost? At what cost are we willing to put the district's financial burden on the backs of employees that have given all they can to this district, a group that has negotiated in the past to have these benefits over salary increases? To me, the refusal to put this information together for our veteran employees, many of us who have spent their entire careers here, seems a bit like trying to pull something off without including all the information. I ask you as a board to please review what this change would do for this group of employees. When your final decision is made, please be forthcoming and upfront with all your information. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Lisa Osman.
Hi, good evening. My name is Lisa Osman. I live at E10023, 331st Avenue in Eau Claire. I've been in the Eau Claire Area School District for 25 years. I have been a teacher to 3- and 4-year-old children for 12 years, and have been the Head Start program coordinator for the last 13 years. I've taught at Park School, Lakeshore, Locust Lane, Lowe's Creek, and I'm currently at Prairie Ridge Early Learning School. When I was hired by the Eau Claire Area School District, it wasn't the highest paying district in the area, but it came with benefits that surpassed other area districts. When I was hired, it came with a salary, insurance, and a contract from the Board of Education that if I stayed in Eau Claire for 25 years and I was 55 years old, I would earn retirement benefits, including district health insurance, until I was 65. I have kept my end of the contract. I earned my master's degree, became nationally board certified, attended many trainings, provide trainings, have continued to grow and learn, and I have served on district and school committees, also that I can positively impact children, families, teachers, and our community. Act 10 brought about many changes, including frozen wages, teachers funding their own WRS contributions, and Eau Claire Area School District providing lower wages than neighboring communities. Staff morale was very low, but I made a promise to Eau Claire Area School District 25 years ago when I signed my first contract. I believe Eau Claire Area School District entered into a contract with me to provide what was promised. Over the years, we have been required to pay more for insurance, and many times our cost of living increase went to pay for insurance. The Eau Claire Area School District values, right up there, include honesty, respect, responsibility, justice, courage, and compassion. I believe that upholding the contract, the agreement between the district and each employee, invokes several of these values. I hope the board will ensure that the district lives up to its own values in how it treats its longest-term employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Laura Miller.
Hi, my name's Laura Miller, 1714 Hillsdale Road. I'm a school psychologist in the Eau Claire Area School District and started in 1995. I've worked in many of our elementary schools and have served the early learning program since 2011. I've maintained my national certification, participated in professional development, and increased my skills over the years. I enjoy my work and my colleagues very much, and sometimes I feel I have the best job in the school district. I'm here to talk about the possible change in OPEB that the board is considering. When I was hired, there were several promises made on both sides. I feel I've maintained my commitments, as almost all employees have. However, several of the commitments made by the district have already been broken, such as the significant reduction in retirement contributions brought about by Act 10, which was not the district's choice, but it has certainly benefited significantly from that change. Freezing our salaries despite successful years of employment was a broken promise. Adding a significant reduction in our post-employment benefits will be another broken promise, which will change our retirements significantly. It feels very unfair that the district repeatedly turns to its employees to solve budget problems, which we are no more responsible for than anyone else. Sometimes it feels that the values of honesty, respect, justice, and responsibility aren't being recognized in the proposals that have been put forth. I would like to ask first that you make no changes to OPEB. I strongly encourage you to wait to make your decision until after the fall election, because a different governor may increase funding for education or may work toward meaningful school funding reform. If you decide you must make a change, I hope you ask for another plan which would make funding OPEB more predictable but comes at much less cost to employees. I hope that as you make this decision, you keep in mind that this group of employees has already had significant promises to us broken and have still chosen to remain with the school district. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Mary Kay Walters.
Good evening. My name is Mary Kay Walters. I live at 1909 Donald Avenue. And I'm here just to say thank you to the board for listening to me. And I'm not here to give you facts and figures. I'm here to give you my story. And my story about being a teacher in the Eau Claire school system since 1991. When I was hired, I was originally given the opportunity to teach in Minnesota, my home state, and in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And I chose Eau Claire, Wisconsin because of everything that I heard about the community. I'd done my research and I found it was a great place to raise kids. It was a community that really valued, as our board says up there, those community core values of honesty, respect, responsibility, compassion, justice, and courage. And that's something that I teach my second graders every day of the year. As I look to retirement in the future, I'm really scared. And my courage right there is shaking all the time about what's going to happen. And I've worked hard, and I'm a teacher not because I'm going to make a lot of money. I'm a teacher because I love my job. And I like to count the number of lives that I influence, not my paycheck. I'm a teacher who, when we came here, my husband left a lucrative job in the Twin Cities because, again, Eau Claire was where we wanted to be. We chose to raise our family here. And I've become the main breadwinner in my family. And as I've gone through it over the years, I've been hit by things like pay freezes. I've been hit by things with Act 10. I've been hit with benefits, you know, getting cut, things like that. But I always stayed here because I believe in the Eau Claire school system. And as I get closer and closer to retirement, I start to get worried about the fact that I may have to retire. Not because I'm done with my teaching, but because it's going to cost me if I don't. I'm scared for the future of teachers here in Eau Claire. I have a daughter who recently, last year, went to UW-Madison, initially to be going to pre-med. And as she got there, she realized, Mom, this isn't what I want to do. She hit instructors and teachers who she'd never experienced before in her life. And she said to me, Mom, I came from the Eau Claire school system where I had the best teachers in the world. And here I am at a Big Ten school, and I've got some of the worst. She said, I want to be one of the great ones. And she wants to become a teacher. What do I say to her, the state of education right now? I'm begging you to please think about keeping those promises to teachers, not only today, but in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Megan Holman.
Good evening. My name is Megan Holman, 1727 West Meade Street, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 54703. First of all, I would like to take a moment to ask those in attendance who are here in support of Roosevelt to please raise your hands so the board can see that there is a strong, unified community in support of Roosevelt as an elementary school. Thank you. Communities are built around neighborhood schools. In an article titled Importance of Students Attending Schools in Their Neighborhoods, the author writes, quote, neighborhood schools can easily foster friendships and keep communities together in and out of the classroom. Michelle Langer, a teacher at West Lincoln Elementary School in Nebraska, believes that neighborhood schools promote students' abilities to engage in activities that occur before and after school. The possibility for such participation is limited if children are bused during their trip to and from school, end quote. As you listen to recommendations tonight from the Demo and Trends Committee, I would implore you to remember Dr. Lloyd Joyal, a former Eau Claire School Board member who passed away last week. Patty Iverson was quoted in the Leader Telegram saying, quote, he was a gentleman, very kind, and he was a really good listener who cared about what people told him. Students were always at the forefront of his decisions, end quote. Board members, please listen to the voices of Roosevelt and the community members speaking on our behalf, just as Dr. Joyal would have done. Please keep the students of Roosevelt at the forefront of your decisions as you hear the recommendations from the committee. Both of our children go to school with their closest friends. Because Roosevelt is a two-section school, those bonds are tight and those friendships are intimate. These are the relationships that our children will lean on in middle school when there's bullying or peer pressure. These are the friendships that they will have throughout life, and these are the friendships that they have poured themselves into. I urge you, members of the board, to find a way to solve the facility needs at Roosevelt instead of breaking this community of students apart. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Shanna Schmidt.
Good evening. My name is Shana Schmidt, 3212 County Farm Road. When we built our home on the northwest side of Eau Claire, we did so with the understanding that our children would attend a high-performing, close-knit neighborhood school less than a mile from our house. We were disappointed when the board did not include any building updates for Roosevelt in the 2016 referendum, but we supported it anyway, because we knew that improving schools improves a community, even if our children didn't benefit directly. We trusted the board's stated commitment to rebuilding our school in the near future and providing our students with the same modern, safe, and functional facility that other schools across the district would receive. The northwest side of Eau Claire is growing. It may not be growing as fast as other areas of town, but it's growing nonetheless. The recommendation by the committee is a short-sighted and unsustainable solution, which doesn't take into account the community or families adversely affected by it. This recommendation is being made not as a result of poor academic performance or declining enrollments or lack of family engagement with the school. It's being made to redirect resources to other schools in other areas of town. I believe strongly that these schools too deserve buildings and resources to fit their needs and will support any well-designed efforts to address their needs, but not at the expense of our children, our teachers, and our school. There are ways to address enrollment and capacity issues without displacing 300 children and separating them from the school, teachers, and friends they have known since kindergarten. Overcrowding issues should not be solved by closing schools and shuffling students into wherever there are a few open seats, then reshuffling them again every few years when population ebbs and flows. Our children should not pay the price for facility expansion across town. It's not the equitable thing to do, and it's certainly not the right thing to do. The committee implies that this recommendation would affect only a small number of people, but the board should consider the significant ripple effect this will have on other elementary schools in the area, not to mention the questionable practice of enhancing some schools at the expense of others. Closing a high-caliber, beloved elementary school in the heart of Eau Claire's northwest side is not the way to address the myriad overcrowding issues across the district, nor the way to strengthen connections with the community. Roosevelt is the fourth smallest school in the district, yet is tied for third highest student-to-staff ratio in all of Eau Claire elementary schools. According to DPI, 100% of Roosevelt staff have over 5 years of experience, a fact that sets the school apart from every other school in the district. The Roosevelt teachers and staff are amazing, passionate people who care about our children and their success. They also care about their building and the community surrounding it. I could go on and on about how highly I view our school and its role in our lives. Unfortunately, Roosevelt staff, teachers, and families were not consulted in this recommendation or given an opportunity to advocate for a different direction prior to tonight, but we are here now and ready to fight for our school. This is not just a dilapidated building, this is a community. These are not numbers on a map, they are children. I implore the board to consider more compassionate options than the recommendation being put forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the docket is Ben Holman. Ben Holman.
Ben Holman, 1727 West Mead Street. Hello, board and community members. I'm here on behalf of the students, parents, and staff of Roosevelt and the northwest neighborhoods of Eau Claire. I am strongly opposed to any proposal to repurpose Roosevelt and bus students to other elementary schools. In 2016, the Demographic Trends and Facility Planning Committee correctly identified the need to replace and expand Roosevelt. Like many Roosevelt parents, I supported the 2016 referendum with the knowledge that Roosevelt would be funded through alternative sources. And like many Roosevelt parents, I'm extremely disappointed that the proposed improvements evaporated after voting for an $87 million referendum. Since the recommendation to improve Roosevelt was made 2 years ago, the northwest side has experienced a period of growth that shows no sign of slowing. Dozens of homes have been built since 2016, and new building sites are added every month. Our growth rate meets or exceeds any other area in our city. North of the North Crossing, there are 67 home parcels for sale in recently developed subdivisions. In addition, there's enough land for sale to create another 24. South of the North Crossing, and very close to Roosevelt, there is a new apartment building under construction and 54 acres for sale to developers. That's enough land for 180 new households, all between the North Crossing and Roosevelt, squarely within Roosevelt's boundaries. A conservative estimate is 100 additional students in those 300 households. I call on the school district to expand or replace Roosevelt with a building that meets the quality and capabilities of the other elementary schools in the district. Shutting down Roosevelt to solve another problem only forces the students of Roosevelt to pay the price. Instead, I urge you to properly deal with the population growth that Roosevelt is experiencing. Don't push our children further down the agenda, but provide the quality facility that their peers receive. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Jessica Irwin.
My name is Jessica Irwin. I live at 3317 Evergreen Lane, Eau Claire 54701. And I'm actually, while I do support Roosevelt, I'm going to be reading words from somebody else tonight who was not able to be here. So this is from Councilmember Jill Christofferson. To members of the Eau Claire School Board, I am grateful for the careful work that you are doing to support and expand the capacity of the Eau Claire schools. It is a difficult climate that requires courageous decisions and with less time for deliberation that we might require. I represent District 4 on the City Council, the location of Roosevelt and Sherman Elementary, Montessori Charter School, and DeLong Middle School. This district is large with active development on the north of Highway 312 and west near I-94. Whatever is our current situation, we can be assured that it will be changing. I would like to ask that you have thoughtful responses to these concerns. Building to meet the demand for affordable housing will increase family housing on the north and west sides of Eau Claire. The current crowding may be in the south, but we need to plan for changes across the city. Families will want to have great schools for their kids within walking, biking, or bus distance. There is a spoken attitude that the south side has better elementary schools. Perhaps the elementary schools on the south side are different. This would be a time to look at the aspects of quality education and make sure that each building has equity. Moving students to even the free and reduced lunch numbers gives me a picture of families with few resources making the adjustments. There has been an active shared services committee for representatives from the Board of Education, the city, and the county governments. It has not met since 2017, but if convened, might provide insight or support during these conversations. The shared information and resources would produce a better environment for decisions. In the board's meeting notes that I have reviewed, I have seen question marks about Roosevelt. With the cost of building going up almost daily, it is difficult to take the time necessary for thoughtful decisions. I would want you to take whatever time is necessary to make decisions for our families. Families should know that their child, wherever they live, will have the best opportunity for school in Eau Claire. Thank you for your work, Councilmember Jill Christofferson.
Thank you. That concludes our public forum for this evening and brings us now to the student representatives report. So who would like to go first? Okay.
I just wanted to bring up a few different points here as especially the seniors around me are getting ready to apply to colleges and going through that process. There were a few concerns brought up again with the weighted GPA. I know last year it was brought up and then it was switched with the class ranks, but as people are applying to colleges, they find that it's really difficult finding a weighted GPA system versus the unweighted that we have, being discouraged from taking AP classes and other rigorous classes and activities that they have, just weighing the risks of ruining their GPA per se and achieving high with what we should be encouraging. So just putting that back on the table and considering that. And another concern brought forth was the low staff that we have in student services to help with career guidance in the terms of not having enough knowledge on higher level colleges for low-income students and the lack of guidance that we have for them. We find a lot of my friends and my peers coming up to me and explaining situations that they find hard of going to their counselor and expressing their lack of knowledge of where to go for high-level colleges, coming from a low-income family who has no college experience and not finding as much help and support as they need. And I think a big problem with that is having a low staff and a big workload on them in pushing more military than we are Ivy League schools per se. So that's just kind of what I wanted to bring up tonight.
Thank you. Gwen?
And I can say as a Memorial student,
Personally, I have had to invest a lot of time into researching what college opportunities are out there that fit my needs, scholarships, all of that stuff. Right now at Memorial, what is being pushed, understandably so, is staying in state. Most of the scholarships that there is available information for are in-state for in-state colleges. But that's not for everyone, and I think it's really important to address that aspect of education, maybe not necessarily staying in Wisconsin, but still getting a great university education. And then a second point that I would like to bring up is encouraging sustainability among our school district. So Memorial, we have our Eco Warriors Club, and we have been really trying to push sustainable practice, especially for waste removal in our school. And we've had a really successful composting program among all 3 lunches. But this year, last year we funded it with our own club money, and this year we went to our student council, which they graciously gave us all of the money that we needed to fund this program for the rest of the year. But we have lots more ideas, and not just for Memorial, for all of the schools in the Eau Claire School District. So I think that even just thinking about encouraging more sustainable practices would do a lot to the amount of waste that we see being put into the landfill when it could be diverted. And yes, as a school, we've found a lot of support for this program, and so I just wanted to raise awareness to the school board.
Great, thank you. And I know we do have for your information, we have a new sustainability policy that we put into place last year. We passed it. And so we got last year for the first time a sustainability report to the board. So maybe this year we can involve student leaders in that process and getting your ideas. Be great. So thank you both for your reports. That brings us now to school board committee reports. Budget development, is there an update? Okay. Demo trends, no, we'll be hearing that a little bit later. LEAP, is there an update? No. Okay. And policy.
We have been working on 4 different proposals that are ready to be presented to the board. The first one concerning Family Engagement Committee. The second one with the head injury policy. The third one related to tobacco use to add vaping, and how to proceed with crowdsourcing and crowdfunding as a policy. They'll be coming your way soon.
Perfect. Thank you. That brings us now to our consent resolution agenda. If you would like to pull an item, just indicate that. He does not have one. That brings us to our consent agenda. If you have an item that you'd like to pull, just indicate that. Otherwise, we'll vote on them all together. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of September 24th, 2018, the Human Resources and Employment Report, the appointment of representatives to the Ad Hoc Revenue Committee, the appointment of representatives to the Ad Hoc Equity Committee on all-night graduation parties, and the proclamation designating October as Dyslexia Awareness Month. So I would entertain a motion to approve 7.2 through 7.6.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second? Okay, any discussion? All right. And I'm trying to see if we have any financial related, but it looks like we don't, so we can do a voice vote tonight. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All right, that motion carries. That brings us now to an individually considered resolution, 8.1, which is to consider adopting a resolution supporting increased state funding for the UW Eau Claire Phillips Hall expansion. And actually we have with us Jake Rassy, who's the Government and Community Relations Specialist for the UWEC Office of the Chancellor. And I don't know if you'd like to maybe just introduce yourself and say a few words, and then we can share the resolution.
Certainly. Thank you, President Luganbill, and all of you on this busy evening for taking a moment to consider this item. Phillips Hall is UW Eau Claire's current science facility, and it was built in 1963 and 1966. And as we consider where our university needs to be 20 years from now to consider continue serving this region and ensuring that students, whether they be in the Eau Claire Area School District or from out of state who come to the university, have an experience that is worthy of their investment in this place, and also that we support the businesses in the area that want to hire and retain these highly talented students. The current building is not a candidate for renovation, so in the next state budget we'll be looking at $109 million, including $13.7 million in gift funding or private philanthropy. And then in the 21-23 state budget, we'll be asking for an additional $147 million for the additional construction. We hope that by having science facilities that better represent the interests and existing academic demand for those programs, as well as a facility that attracts and retains high-quality talent in the Chippewa Valley and Eau Claire area, is crucial to ensuring that the university keeps serving this region well. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions you may have, but I appreciate you taking the time to consider how this, in the higher education sort of end of this field that we're dealing with, can still have a positive impact. We believe that bringing students to campus to give them an opportunity and see what education can look like beyond their formative years is crucial. We have so many tremendous programs that I know your board members are aware of that do that. And this is just one more way that we can modernize our existing facilities to really allow every student in the Eau Claire Area School District, any student who comes to UW Eau Claire, to have the kind of education they're going to need to be successful in the 21st century. So again, I appreciate your time this evening.
Yeah, great, thank you. And I think it is, does anyone have any questions, first of all? Oh, yep, Commissioner Hombuck-Boyle.
I just want to make a comment. As I read the resolution, all I could think about was the strength of our bond between our local public schools and UW Eau Claire, in the sense that probably the largest number of students that cross over to higher education is from our kids here in Eau Claire to UW Eau Claire. And so this certainly will impact their education, and I'm hoping it starts a relationship so that when we have resolutions and things that we need to impact our public schools, we can do that together as two public entities that serve kids and families in our community. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Commissioner Beacom?
I actually had a general question as a newer person, and of course I support the Phillips Hall expansion both as a faculty member at UW Eau Claire and because of the collaboration with the district. This is my first time seeing something in the form of a resolution to support an outside entity, so to speak. And could someone just tell me a little bit about how this would be the approach to take, as opposed to a different approach, something like a letter of support, or why the form of a resolution?
Well, and we talked about that with them. I think a resolution has a little bit more power because it's something legislative coming from a local body, but this will be sent to the legislature, to the members of different committees at the state level, and then to the governor. So you're right that this is probably the first time in recent years that the board has taken a position on an external project. But I think that this is perhaps a new chapter in that, and I think in recognizing that with the university and with other entities, we're really in this together right now, and we have the same goals. So that's kind of where it's coming from, and I think I hope that it also, as Commissioner Hombuck-Boyle said, opens up the door for some further dialogue with the university. I know last year we passed a resolution asking for more shared collaborative climate among the different entities, CVTC, the university, the school district, to have some opportunities for shared governance, opportunities for sharing services and resources and research and innovation. So I'm hoping that efforts like this can help nudge us in that direction too.
When you had your discussions, were there any disadvantages in getting involved in sort of these outside matters?
I think that if this were perhaps a private endeavor, then that could be the case. I think because they're also a government entity like ours, and particularly because they're an educational government entity like us, I think that that's why perhaps it works a little bit more in tandem. But I think that if we were to pursue something like this with a private entity, I think we would have that concern. Does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay. Seeing no further questions, I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution supporting this project.
So moved.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we can do a voice vote for this. All those in, actually, we can discuss it. Does anyone want to discuss the motion to approve this resolution? Okay. Oh, yeah, yes, Commissioner Torres.
I think that a proposal of this nature creates an environment where we can envision our community receiving students from out of area. And certainly that's something that will be very beneficial, not only for the students that we educate in Eau Claire, but those in the communities around us. I think it's a good investment. It would be a good investment.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, seeing no other lights, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? Okay, the motion carries unanimously, and I do have a resolution for you to bring back to the powers that be.
Thank you all so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, that brings us now to the our committee reports and items for discussion. Tonight, our first agenda item is an update from the Demographic Trends and Facilities Planning Committee, and we have two individuals coming up, Ms. Kohler and Mr. Lyons. Hi.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to share the Demographic Trends and Facility Committee's recommendations regarding elementary enrollment trends and facility needs with the board tonight. You may recall that on May 7th, 2018, the committee presented information to the board regarding trends that might affect long-term planning, including early childhood space needs, north side schools that are under capacity, and south side schools that are nearing or are over capacity. At that meeting, we shared that in order for the committee to have the full set of options to look at, it was recommended that the decision to renovate or build a new school at Roosevelt be rescinded. This would give the committee the ability to look at all of the options that were available. The board asked for a review of the history of Roosevelt recommendations, which you may recall were presented on May 21st, 2018. After reviewing the study of Roosevelt, the board asked that the following be studied and returned to the board. The first was recommendations from the Committee on Long-Term Planning. Second, equity to be considered when planning for Roosevelt. And third, a plan for safety due to the lack of a secure entrance at Roosevelt and the fact that there was no safe drop-off point of that building. We come before the board tonight to share what the committee has learned in regard to those requests and to make a recommendation to the board moving forward. And I'd like to introduce Phil Lyons, Chair of the Demographic Trends and Facilities Committee, who will be sharing information tonight.
President Luganbill, Dr. Hardebeck, and members of the board. I think it's a pleasure to be here tonight. What it is it's certainly an honor to be selected by a committee to come here and inform you and communicate with you many of the thoughts around a very complicated and very difficult problem. So I want to give you some insight into the last 2 years of the work that we've done. How do I? Okay. So the Demographic and Trends Facilities Committee is a committee of the board that is charged with providing annual recommendations to the full board regarding demographic trends, boundary issues, capacity updates, and other relevant information from around the district. This is our committee. Our committee included board members Charles Vu and Lori Bika. I serve as the chair. Also, Mark Goings, Dave Fitzgerald, Carol Johnson, Tim Norden, Janet Seymour, and Ryan Weichelt. They were all returners to the committee from the previous year. And last year, we welcomed Ann Hartman, Amanda Gow, Marquita Davis, Josh Clements, Nick Ashman, and Alicia Arnold. We represent many different backgrounds professionally and personally, and we reside throughout the Eau Claire Area School District. I recognize that the board is familiar with these principles. They're the committee's planning principles, but I thought it would be helpful to highlight some of the principles that really set the stage for our recommendations and that drove our discussions. 4 of the principles noted are in blue text. And that's not to say that these principles are more important than others, but these 4 principles were discussed quite a bit and they were very important in our discussions. As I reported in May of 2018, the full bullet point highlights the importance of examining current and projected demographic and housing data. Committee member Ryan Weichelt is a faculty member at UW Eau Claire, and he obtained address information of the students around the district. And he's a geography professor. He geomapped all of the addresses and the populations, and it really was very helpful in giving the committee a full understanding of population densities and what was happening in the district. The committee examined schools that were below 65% capacity and those that were nearing 100% to determine which areas within the district were currently facing or were likely soon to be facing enrollment and capacity issues. These 2 guiding principles help the committee to develop a plan to address the long-term needs of the district within the other highlighted guidelines: the cost of maintaining existing buildings and the priority to provide a minimum of a 3-section grade level arrangements for students. Information regarding the committee's study of Roosevelt and elementary enrollment trends were reviewed by the board on May 7th and on May 21st. I thought it would be helpful to review some of that information with the board. You'll remember that the discussion regarding Roosevelt really began in early 2016. And I'd like to walk you through some of the milestones of the committee's discussions and the deliberations that we had between now and then. In many cases, what you'll see on the slides are excerpts that are taken directly from the agendas of the Demographic and Trend Committee. The committee is cognizant that we're offering a recommendation to the board, but the timeline for making decisions is very complex, and later in the presentation I'll share a recommended timeline that's beyond today. So more than 2 years ago, after hearing about enrollment trends at Roosevelt and concerns with the condition of the facility, the committee examined options for Roosevelt, including the options that are all referenced here. The first option was to add to the existing building, providing updates and additions that would create a 3-section school on that current site, really a renovation. The committee also explored building a new 3-section school on the same property, demolishing the current facility. And then finally, the committee did look and examined building a new school on a completely different site. An architectural study for each 3 of those options was conducted, and it resulted in the following projections. Renovating the existing additions to the building, making it a 3-section, was estimated somewhere in the area of $16.5 to $17.9 million. The second option, which was new construction on that same site, was $18 million to $19 million. And option 3 did not differ that much, although there was land acquisition. The price for that was $18.3 million to $19.4 million. There was a request that a separate, in August of 2016, the board actually decided not to include Roosevelt on that referendum. There was a request that a separate flyer be drafted regarding the needs at South and at Roosevelt, since they would not be included in that referendum. Some board members felt that it was imperative that this message get out to staff in those buildings so that they could also share the information with school community. And this was included in frequently asked questions document for the referendum. When the committee asked for the architectural study, it recognized that those needs of Roosevelt as a standalone issue. It saw that problem in isolation. The committee did not, however, at that time examine the needs of the district as a whole. Between August 2016 and the early spring of 2018, the committee examined elementary enrollment trends that were really district-wide. And as the committee did so, it was evident that although the needs of Roosevelt are really indisputable as a facility and a building, addressing those needs in isolation only really solved one issue and did not focus on the larger issues of the entire school district and what the district is facing. And it didn't create a long-term viable plan for Eau Claire. In spring of 2018, the committee looked at the overcrowding issues of Prairie Ridge and schools that are under capacity on the north side. We toured many of them. We actually visited Prairie Ridge right when the children were getting let out, and it was just mayhem. In addition, the committee discussed options to provide relief to schools that were over capacity by adding to schools that were under capacity or moving students. They also discussed absorbing and redistributing the Roosevelt students. The committee then discussed at length the consequences of changing its recommendation for Roosevelt, its 2016 recommendation, to the school board. After studying past enrollment trends and projected trends for the next several years, at its April 2018 meeting, the committee voted then to rescind the previous recommendation to the board regarding Roosevelt. The committee believed that there were other options that it had not previously considered and couldn't consider if the vote on Roosevelt remained. Committee, those options could include the potential of Roosevelt being an early childhood education center, or changing the boundaries for Roosevelt to reduce the high capacity in that school. This also opened the potential to bring schools such as Locust Lane and Longfellow into the conversation, which are two schools that are below 65% capacity, which is one of the principles that drives the committee. It was before the board on May 7th and then again on May 21st to share the history of the recommendations and the work of the committee that led to that decision. At the conclusion of the meeting, some board members expressed an interest in receiving recommendations from the committee on long-term planning as well as some short-term options for Roosevelt. The committee has since worked to establish those recommendations. The Demographic Trend and Facilities Committee is aware of the community's reaction when money was invested in Little Red a few years later than it was closed, and those students were absorbed elsewhere in the district. It was knowledgeable to us. We were also aware that there were concerns surrounding the lack of a secure entrance at Roosevelt. It was brought up here at one of the meetings. And in May of 2018, the committee sought feedback from the board regarding several deferred maintenance items that were slated for Roosevelt. Roosevelt has been absent from the summer 17 and 2018 facility work and is not slated for improvements in the summer of 2019. The Director of Building and Grounds has been working with the principal to determine if there are things that can be done while a recommendation for Roosevelt is being developed and a decision by the board is being made. In addition, in the summer of 2018, street improvements were made to create a better and safer loading and unloading zone for those students. Which brings us to today. The Demo and Trends Committee is before the board today to share a recommendation that we believe will address the full scope of issues that the district is facing at the pre-K through elementary levels, as was reported in May of 2018. And we'll share those with the board. A recommendation from the Committee on Long-Term Planning, equity considerations when planning for Roosevelt, and a plan for safety at Roosevelt. So here are current issues. One of the longer standing members of our committee is a gentleman by the name of Dave Fitzgerald. And he was at one of our meetings, and we had been talking through these issues for some time. And he very succinctly rattled off these three issues, and it summarized all of the things that we had been talking to up to this point. And they were early childhood space, north side under capacity needs, and south side over capacity. So first, we'll need to keep our attention on the increased demand for early childhood education. Prairie Ridge has received a lot of positive feedback across the city. And the demand for that early childhood education is only going to grow. The committee recognizes it. When we went to Prairie Ridge, we saw it firsthand. With that demand going to continue to grow, it comes with space needs. Second, a number of our north side elementary schools are currently under 65% capacity, and that is a guiding principle. The committee discussed options to increase the capacity in those schools as indicated in our guiding principles. And the south side of Eau Claire continues to see real estate development boom. There are ample opportunities for new subdivisions on the south side. We believe that the committee needed to consider the potential that schools like Mans and Meadowview are only one development away from being at overcapacity. Putnam and Robbins are not far behind. And Putnam and Robbins are two schools which were just added to. So to give some background on the data that I just referenced, here are the third Friday counts and capacity from September of 2018. On the north side, I believe currently Locust Lane and Longfellow are at 55 and 56% respectively. I think these are last year's numbers. Is that correct? Or are these are last year's numbers. So
Yes.
These are last year's numbers. Currently, Locust Lane and Longfellow are at 55 and 56% capacity. There's also substantial availability in space at Sam Davie. Sam Davie is at 74%. Now, as you can see, the capacities on the south side, and I know that's somewhat difficult to read. Mans is at 91%, and Meadowview is at 94%. Putnam is at 90%, and Robbins is at 81%. But again, both of those schools were just recently renovated, and that space is starting to fill in. So this is a map that shows the current boundaries of the elementary schools that serve the north side. From roughly left to right, you can see the attendance areas of Sherman, then Roosevelt, Longfellow, Sam Davie, Locust Lane, and Northwoods. So 4 of those 6 North Side schools are under 75% capacity. And in fact, these 6 elementary schools combined have seats for 850 additional students before reaching full capacity. Now, only 31 of those are in Roosevelt. In contrast, on the south side of the district, Robbins, Meadowview, Mans, Putnam Height are all between 81 and 94% capacity. And these 4 schools combined would welcome only 236 students before all of them were at 100% capacity. So what's that all mean? That means that of the 1,036 elementary seats that are available across the district, 850 of them are on the north side. Although there are some areas of potential growth on the north side, as we heard, there are new subdivisions that are popping up. Schools in that area do have the capacity to serve several hundred students more in their current facilities. And when considering the long-term planning, there's a greater and really a much more urgent need to take a look at the south side of the district. The committee talked a lot about this issue, about equitable programming. And one of the guiding principles of the committee is to ensure that students have access to equitable programming and the services that accompany them. And this was emphasized in the May 21st board meeting, where some members had asked also about equity. And this graph gives a view into the number of staff members that are assigned to a typical 3-section building as compared to what's assigned to Roosevelt. And as you can see, the vast majority of resources and the supporting teachers at Roosevelt are part-time. An unintended consequence is inequitable programming for the students at Roosevelt. And for example, students at a 3-section building have access to a school counselor all day, every day. If you're in a 3-section school, you'll be able to see a counselor any day of the week. But at Roosevelt, the counselor is there the equivalent of 3.5 days per week. If a Roosevelt student has a crisis or needs to speak with a counselor, whether or not that's going to be able to happen is if the counselor is there on that particular day. Roosevelt is a 2-section school, and one of our priorities, one of our guiding principles is that we build to 3-section schools. Roosevelt's a 2-section school, also has half the gifted and talented staffing of a 3-section building. The gifted and talented teacher provides the equivalent of 1 day of support per week to the Roosevelt staff and students. And although each elementary school in the district has the same type of positions, student access to the adults in those positions is not equitable across those schools. When compared to students in other schools, students at Roosevelt do not have the same level of access to the staff that they deserve. Another guiding principle for the committee is to maximize the educational operational efficiency. There are a number of positions that are staffed full-time regardless of the size of the school. For example, all elementary schools will have a principal. All elementary schools will have a full-time secretary. All elementaries will have a custodian. And that doesn't differ on whether or not the school serves 250, like at Locust Lane, or 512, as is the case at Robbins. So committing to a 3- and 4-section elementary school maximizes the efficiency of our resources. So now we're a committee really at the crossroads. The committee did not meet in September of 2018 because in order to move forward as charged, the committee needs some direction, some guidance from the board. After studying the current and the projected trends at the elementary level and considering that the board request for long-term planning, equity, and safety, the committee's developed 2 potential solutions that meet the needs of the entire district. So the first option, and I recognize that's somewhat hard to read, develop a plan to repurpose Roosevelt into a 4K center, including a facility upgrade for that purpose, reestablishing the elementary boundaries, absorbing Roosevelt students into the North Side schools so that Roosevelt can become a 4K center. develop a facility plan to address the capacity issues at the Southside Elementary schools. That's a separate plan. And option 2, develop a plan to address capacity issues at Northside schools by maintaining Roosevelt as an elementary site. That would include reestablishing elementary boundaries to balance enrollments at a facility and have a facility plan for Roosevelt as an elementary school. The plan also calls for the district to develop a separate plan for dealing with the capacity issues at Prairie Ridge and to develop a facility plan to address those Southside capacity issues. So these are some of the estimated cost comparisons as sketched out by, this is by Larry?
Yes.
By our building and grounds supervisor. The cost of each of these options is outlined here. In order to function within the guidelines of the district provided, both options call for redrawing some of the elementary boundaries. The committees estimates that in both cases, these boundary changes will be cost neutral. In option 1, which repurposes Roosevelt as a 4K site, the estimated cost to upgrade Roosevelt is $1.5 to $3 million. Option 1 also requires a facility plan to address capacity issues at Southside schools. This is estimated between $16 and $18 million, and the total estimated cost for the option 1 is $17.5 to $21 million. In option 2, where Roosevelt remains an elementary school, the estimated cost to renovate, add to, or replace Roosevelt is between $16.5 and $19.4 million. The facility plan to address capacity issues at Southside schools would remain at $16 to $18 million, and the development of a plan for an additional facility for 4K would be between $13.5 and $14.5 million. The total cost of option 2 is in the neighborhood of $46 to $51.9 million. So based on the study of the district needs and the cost of the options outlined, the Demographic and Trends Committee is recommending that the district repurpose Roosevelt as a 4K site. That was voted on by the committee to absorb Roosevelt students into the surrounding Northside schools with the available seats and address the capacity issues at the Southside schools through construction. At the May 7th, 2018 meeting, the board asked for a full implementation plan, including communication, listening sessions, and preparing the community and the district for any changes. And that plan is outlined here. The committee understands the board, families, and other stakeholders will have many questions and will want more information and have a lot of input on this recommendation. In order to allow the board time to gather information and the community the opportunity to ask questions, voice their concerns, share their support, the committee would recommend moving this timeline forward. Over the next several months, the committee recommends the board hold several listening sessions regarding the recommendations so that the board can vote on which option the district will utilize moving forward in the spring of 19. Since both options recommend boundary changes at the elementary level, the 2019-2020 school year would be used to support and prepare families who are impacted by any changes, and those changes would be implemented in the 2020 school year. So as I shared, the committee explored two options for addressing the current and projected issues the district is facing at the 4K and the elementary levels. And before the committee can move forward with additional work, we need some direction from the board. Although the committee recommends repurposing Roosevelt to a 4K site and absorbing the current Roosevelt students into the surrounding Northside schools and addressing the Southside issues with a facility plan, option 2 does exist as well. And of course, the board could also accept neither of these recommendations and could provide the committee with a new charge. So we ask that tonight you provide the committee with some guidance as to how you would like us to proceed with our work in the coming year. And with that, I will close, and I would answer any questions from the board.
Thank you for that report. It's a lot to take in, so, and I'm sure it was a lot to work on. for you all. I'll open it up in just a minute. One thing I will say is I brought Theodore Roosevelt tonight because when I thought about this over the weekend and this discussion that we need to have as a district, this quote from him, which is that in any moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing you can do is the wrong thing. And the worst thing you can do is nothing. So I think it's very clear that we can't do nothing as a board and as a district. We need to be discussing these issues. And that's why we're all here. I guess
I would also say, President Luganville, that the committee members, and we passed this decision on to you, but the committee members spent hours, and we realized at one point that the discussions, we didn't even have enough time within the regular duly scheduled meetings, and that we had to break into subgroups really to complete the work, because we were routinely starting at 4:30 and going over the 6 o'clock time, and then it was trying to recapture where we were with those conversations and the momentum a month later. So we started going to a more frequent meeting scale.
Well, and I think that I served on the, as you know, I served on the committee 2 years ago and was part of that group that voted for the recommendation on Roosevelt. But you know, if there's one thing you can say about that committee, it's that it's a committee of professionals who are not in there with an agenda. They're cartographers, demographers, teachers, business owners, realtors, city planners. I mean, they're people in university administration. I mean, it's a group that's very professional and very focused on just looking at data, looking at trends. So I want to convey our appreciation for your work in putting this together, and I'm sure it was a lot of work just to hash through so many of the different pieces of this. I remember 2 years ago how in-depth those discussions were. I guess I'm not seeing any board lights at this point, but one, yeah, I hope you'll forgive me. It's a lot to take in and think about, and we as a board are hearing this presentation for the first time as this full group of people staring at us. So you have to understand the position that we're in right now. And I think that's in a position of we just need to be, we need to learn more. We need to discuss this more and study this more and provide opportunities for public input right now through the next several months. Commissioner Torres.
I'd like to understand a little bit more the proposal.
Sure.
It is not clear to me to what extent the projections of growth in terms of demographics in the north side have been taken into consideration for this plan. And second, I understand by what you just said that you've been trying to make an effort to think about the situation of the particular school in the context of the district.
Sure.
My question would be, to what extent would we be undoing what we did last year by modifying the boundaries for North and Memorial by introducing these new proposed boundaries for the elementary school?
So I think I heard two questions.
There are two questions.
Okay. Let me, demographics is an imperfect science. I think what you were asking was, is there population growth that the committee understood might grow in the north as well as the south, and what led us to believe that it would be growing potentially more in the south. Was that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. When we took a look at the district boundaries, the area, the land, the sheer land for development that is south of 94, that is being developed, or that just is greater. It's more ample. The north side is a bit landlocked with natural boundaries as well as other school districts. And when we looked at that, we came to the conclusion that the growth would be in south because of that one differing element. The second is about the high schools, and this is on the elementary boundaries, and this really doesn't change the boundaries of the middle schools. It only focuses on smoothing the seat ratios that exist in some of those north side districts that you saw on that map. So when the committee back in 2016 recommended that we put money into Roosevelt to fix the facility, and everyone recognizes needs work. It needs renovation. But when you look outside of it as a demographic and trend committee, and you see that there's capacity in at least 2 elementary schools that are under the 65%, and the demographic committee hasn't done anything to readjust those to move those up to 65%, that's when we started looking at the full scale of demographics across the entire enrollment of the elementary schools. We looked at the 4K and the capacity issues there, and then we were also being told at the same time, if you're going to do a renovation of Roosevelt, you also need to have something to be able to address Manns, because Manns is at 90%, and if there's one, the capacity that is just not there. As I talked about, in the 1,000 seats that are open, there's only about 200 that you can shuffle down on the south side.
Can I just add something on your question about the North Memorial boundaries? So when the committee was studying the boundaries and looking at the north side, they were very cognizant of that change that had already happened with North Memorial, and so they didn't want to impact that boundary change by the potential, with the elementary rebounding recommendations. And I think they talked about that for several months. I mean, that was always one of their top priorities, was not to recommend a change that would impact the high school boundary change, because that had just been implemented.
Well said.
I have a question regarding the kind of coming from the committee, and it's been said in other places too, about how this side of town is landlocked. I know of, I think, 2 subdivisions that are new or for sale or coming into the west side. I'm sure your committee's discussed these.
Yep.
But then I think there's also, beyond those, just a lot of land on the west side, just open land that could be zoned for any number of things. So I'm just wondering how that played a role in your discussions and in some of those developments, and if you spoke with folks on the west side about that.
We did talk about that, and when Ryan was putting down the density charts,
yep.
There is plenty of opportunity on the west for growth. You are absolutely correct. It just hasn't materialized as of yet.
Right.
It's also, there's very industrial areas over there as well that that you never know, but it just hasn't materialized in what we saw in taking the address numbers, dropping it into a geo mapping, and put it and projecting it.
Yeah. Well, it's like you say, it's not an exact science.
No, it's not an exact science.
Yeah.
I think the other thing to consider is of the 1,000 seats that are available at elementary, 800 are in the 6 schools on the north side and 200 in the 4 schools on the south side, which would mean that the north side with current facilities and availability has the potential and the capacity to be able to grow 4 times faster than the south side and still be in an okay spot. So when you look at it relative to, you know, I would say relative to what other schools, the position of other schools, that's the concern. So between those 4 schools, I would say, you know, all 4 of them are a subdevelopment away from being full, where on the north side, we really could accommodate several subdevelopments and still have room within the schools.
Okay. And I think that would be good information for us to look at, certainly. Maybe it could be uploaded on board docs or something, a chart of that or something. Yeah, Commissioner Harder.
Well, first, thank you for this work. Thank you and the committee for this really clearly difficult, nuanced, detailed work, and also fraught work. You know, this is obviously, there's a lot of passion about this for good reason. I'm looking at the page in your presentation talking about the basis of these recommendations and the 11 different principles. And I'm hearing a different principle among some of the concerns that I've been able to sort of absorb on sort of the side of we need to maintain Roosevelt. It's one of those is the notion of the importance to the neighborhood.
Yep.
And obviously that's, I think, pretty easy for all of us to understand. I don't see anything of that nature listed in these principles. I don't know if it's necessarily appropriate or not, but I don't, could you speak a little bit
Sure.
to how that has influenced the discussion?
If there is one thing that the committee did struggle with, it was that the concept of a neighborhood school is a great thing. And for children to be able to walk to their school, for it to be the center of the community, was, the committee recognized the value of that. At one point we had the Jim Fye, who works and directs the busing services, student services. And you know, he talked about some of the same things. So it is a principle that's in here, the cost of transportation, the impact to the neighborhood, the children go to the same school. And there are principles in this document that do talk to it, and the committee did struggle with it. But at the end of the day, when we were talking about $18 million to be put into a 3-section school that was in isolation, surrounded by several schools that were under 65% capacity, which was also one of our, that started us talking about generally taking a look at all of the boundaries. If you've seen the north side boundaries, there's some really odd lines that were drawn. And we really simply started at what do we do with this kind of triangle that runs straight up, I think, western. What do we do? And what do we do with High Clare, the new subdivision that is going there? And when High Clare is developed, the families that buy in that area are going to want to know where their children go to school, and we were pressed to really come up with an answer for that. Those conversations evolved, and they evolved into the recommendation that we've given to you today. These are hard and very difficult conversations. They're hard and difficult decisions, and we struggled with them as well as I think probably you will.
Thank you for that. And you'd also described the sort of, I think if I understood correctly, a bit of a shift that happened in the last year or two from looking at some of these problems in isolation to a more holistic.
Yeah.
And that kind of led to this conclusion and these recommendations. And can you talk a little bit about, just a little bit more about that shift? And I mean, I assume that's a perspective we'd want to maintain going forward on the demographic
yeah, so
committee.
demographic and trends is looking at the overall trends, the demographics that are in the district, and what we were looking at back in 16 was a facility that needs work. You have a facility, it needs improvement, it needs renovation, we need to do something with that facility. It has deferred maintenance, it has maintenance issues, it has an entryway that's not secure, it has a whole number of things that we really need. So it wasn't lost on us that some of these kind of things back in history took place with Little Red. And we put some money into Little Red, and then we decided, okay, so we put the brakes a little bit on what are we going to put in there, because what's the overall direction that we're going to take the elementary school? Because that feeds everything, right? So it moved from a facility-focused conversation about what we're doing with the maintenance of a building to a larger conversation of the needs of the entire district and trying to prioritize, which was a kind of a meandering discussion that took place over about 3 to 4 months and was giving some committee members some frustration that it didn't seem to be going anywhere until the time that Dave Fitzgerald said, look, it's about 4K and it growing. It's about some of the undercapacity needs on the north side, because not all are under capacity. Roosevelt's at 93%, and it needs work. And what are we going to do if there's one more subdivision on the south? So let's wrap all of these problems up and let's try to deal with them in a holistic way, as opposed to just dealing with the problem of a building that needs some badly needed maintenance attention.
Yeah, I would agree that we do need to look at it as a big picture, and I mean, this is obviously, for me, it's emotional to be discussing Roosevelt in this context, because I went there, and my mom went there, and all my siblings went there. So I have to take that hat off and not necessarily wear that tonight. But I also, when I bought my first house, I bought the house right next to Roosevelt Elementary School. And fixing up that old yellow house was a labor of love for me and my family. But also it was really a special thing where the school, the teachers would check up and they'd come over. And that's the kind of culture that you have at Roosevelt. It's a wonderful place. But we owe it to everyone in the district to, when we talk about issues of elementary school boundaries, when we talk about capacity, when we talk about planning for the future, we can't have tunnel vision, and we have to look at everything. And Roosevelt is a lovely, lovely building, albeit small, and it does need TLC and improvements. We've established that time and time again, but we need to flesh out exactly what kind of TLC the West Side is going to get before we spend the money, and we need to think strategically about this. And what we certainly cannot have, we just can't have it, is the situation we had 10 years ago in this district, where we invested millions of dollars in Little Red because that's what the neighborhood picketed the school board for, and then the school board came to the conclusion that they had to close that school, and there was an uproar. And it is to this day a sore spot for everyone that was involved from every angle. It managed to make everyone upset. So we certainly can't have that. So we need to discuss this. We need to take it to the community. We need to ask parents and the public and other stakeholders their perspective on it, and we need to think big about what this means, not just for the West Side and 8th Street, but what it means for the whole district. I just watched, I thought about this all weekend, obviously, as I'm sure all the other board members did, and I just watched the new Doctor Who premiere, and like the character Doctor Who regenerates, and I kind of think of Roosevelt in that way. In some way, Roosevelt needs to regenerate. I am not in a position to say what that should look like. I don't think anyone, in looking at what we've just looked at tonight and in discussing it, could say with complete certainty what we know it needs to look like. But I think that we do know that it will need to, that something new will need to happen to maintain its viability as an institution in our district. What that looks like, I think, is up for a lot of discussion and a lot of debate and a lot of study. But something will need to happen. So I also just want to put it out there that we need to be actively discussing these topics with the city. There has been kind of a silo approach to school development, enrollment projections, new developments in the city. There's been a total silo in many ways for many years. And I know that there are efforts being made to end that, and that really needs to happen. We need to make sure that the school district and the plan commission are on each other's radars, and that when developers are in connection with the city and talking about things, that we are the first call that the city makes. I'm not sure if we're on the top of their list right now, that as the first call, and we really ought to be. Yeah. So I certainly, as far as your timeline, to be specific, your timeline asking that we spend the fall and the winter having listening sessions, I agree with that part of it. I think that's definitely needed. And I think that, as you said, the committee has done everything it can up until this point, preparing a report and recommendations, and now it really needs to go through the messy process of democracy, and that's where we come in, and that's where the public comes in. And so I would definitely support having the listening sessions this fall and winter, and potentially putting together a study group of the board or another group to really work out what exactly we're going to be asking of the participants in the listening sessions, so that it does not become a 2-hour period of people telling their personal family story, as much as we want to hear those, but it actually can become people coming together and being stakeholders in the solution, and giving us their specific ideas and proposals that they have, because that's what I want to elevate the discourse in that way. I do not want parents and others to have the only their MO being just coming to us and being upset about it. I really want them to have the position of active stakeholder in this, to help us make our decisions. So, do any other board members have comments? Or I can't see your microphone if you had it on. Did you? Okay. Okay. All right. Well, so I guess I want to come out of this with at least a little bit of clarity. Do board members at the very least support having listening sessions through the fall and winter? Could we just do that's probably something that the committee needs from us tonight, really, and you're nodding your head. So I personally support that, but yeah, Commissioner Vu.
I want to say that I will be the first one to move to that suggestion, listening sessions for 2018 to 19. The reason I said that is because, like you said, we are having a need to look at the bigger picture, and I was one who pushed for that. And in that regard, we also understand the importance of neighborhood strength. So I really want to see that the committee's decision is not the final decision, but if there is a better proposal, better solution, that will be a win-win for the district. That is the time, the listening session is the time for community to come forward and not just speak with the emotion, but speak with the heart, the mind, to see what is the better solution for all of us, so that there is no one single group that is intentionally doing things for his or her own benefit. I don't think the committee wants to do things for his or her own benefit. If there's anything that is fall short in the recommendation, it's because we don't have all the information. So I want to see listening session be a time for real heart-to-heart talk about the best possibility that we can all look into.
Commissioner Torres.
Would it be possible to request a formal report from the city about the growth on that side of Eau Claire?
On the west side or the south side?
The area of influence to the school.
Okay.
The northwest side.
Northwest, yeah.
The northwest side. Okay.
And I think that would be good to ask for. We as a board could ask for that.
We could do both.
Yeah.
And then we would have
Yeah.
information for the whole district.
Okay. So we'll do, we'll ask for a report. You wrote, do you have the specifics? Did you catch what he specifically asked for? So that we know what to follow up on?
Projected, yes, projected building or increase in housing on the northwest side, south side.
Potential developments.
That too?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll do that, and we'll look to plan fall and winter listening sessions, and we'll get a group together to discuss exactly what we want out of the listening sessions. And I really want to make sure that it is an engaging process for the people who go and worth their time and worth our time to have it. And can, as Commissioner Vu said, they can be an active part in the process. Commissioner Hombuck-Boyle.
I just wanted to ask a question, and thank you for the report. It's very well done. About the APL study, do we look at that information anymore as far as the population study for Eau Claire?
I can answer that.
Thank you.
That will actually be coming in a report at the next board meeting. The opening of schools report has information from APL in it.
Okay. Any other board members have comments, questions? Yeah, Commissioner Harder.
I guess as chair of the budget committee, I just will state the obvious that when you look at option 1 versus option 2, 17 to 21 million versus 46 to 52 million, it speaks very loudly. And we're in a difficult place with our budget at the moment, and we can go into detail about why. I think we will later, but I will say that if and when we go into these listening sessions, and in the spirit of trying to find solutions or focus more on the mind rather than the heart, I think, as Commissioner Vu put it, that's a big part. And if there are, I see some shaking heads right now, and if there are reasons why these numbers are to be brought into question, that's a great opportunity to please make sure you're organized and coordinated in doing that. So I think you understand what the arguments are here for it. They're compelling here on paper, and if there are reasons why they should be brought into question, that's a great time to do it.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, we have a few areas that we'll follow up on with that. And I know it was mentioned in the public forum that the difficulty of having to, I think it was said that we as a district should not be having to change boundaries. We did update our policy on boundaries and reviewing them as a district so that it's in alignment with the census process, which is very important. It's a difficult topic for boards to look at, but you take, for instance, last year when we changed the high school boundaries that had not been changed since North High School opened in 1962, there was a need for doing that, and we simply cannot play kick the can on those kinds of issues. So that's just a little context there. We're committed now with that new policy as a district that we will be reviewing boundaries. Not that we'll necessarily be changing them, but that we're going to have meetings like this and we're going to be looking at it in a very in-depth way because we simply have to, even if it isn't politically convenient. So we have a couple follow-ups here. Not seeing anyone else from the board, we do have the ability for public comment. If you'd like to comment, commenting after a committee item is the opportunity to ask questions or seek clarification. We can't necessarily answer your question this night, but then your question will be noted and put in the record. So if anyone would like to speak at this time, you would just come up to the microphone and state your name and address. And I think that's it for Ms. Kohler and Mr. Lyons, and thank you very much. I appreciate it, you coming. If anyone would like to speak, otherwise we'll move on. Okay, I don't. This is the public comment time, so it is time to speak at the microphone, and your comments need to be seeking clarification or asking questions. And we'll have a timer on it for 3 minutes. Is that what you said? 3 minutes, yeah. And you just state your name and address.
Thank you. Laura Hurd, 3204 Glenhaven Place in Eau Claire. The part that I would highly consider is just the thought process on the development that has happened in the southern schools and why communities are being built in the southern schools, where if there was money being put into the northern schools, that development would naturally happen. Living on the northwest side of Eau Claire, there is lots of land, lots of capability of developments, lots of opportunity for that growth, but people are naturally moving to the new schools because they want the new shiny buildings versus the old buildings. So I would just take that in consideration with the overall plan and process as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gina Help, 1707 Hillsdale Road, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 54703. With the consideration, if we could also find out, like with the people that live like close to Roosevelt, where the district lines would be reconfigured to, because like if some of the kids are going to be moved, say, into Sherman, we're just going to be pushed into higher capacity, or schools that are already at high capacity. So we're already going from one high capacity school to a school that's nearing or at like a 74% that's going to then be, with the influx of students, going to be pushed to a fairly high capacity again, because we're not going to be pushed into one of the lower capacity schools if that's the plan. So it'd be nice to know if you do redistrict, how you're going to redistrict it, and what the plans are for that. Also, I don't know if it was considered ever to try to put the 4K into the elementary school instead of doing two separate buildings, to have the 4K as part of the elementary school to save costs instead of having two separate buildings, if that was ever looked at. And then also, just a clarification on the timeline, would this go into effect in the 2020 school year, the start of the 2020 school year, or the 2019 school year for the, if you were to whatever you decide to do, kind of thing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Would you like me to answer that last question?
Yes, if you could.
Okay. Our practice is that we give schools 1 year to adjust to a change, a full school year. So if this were approved, it would not take place next fall. It would be for the fall after that.
Okay, my name is Jessie Irwin, 3317 Evergreen Lane, 54701. I guess I was really confused by the numbers, why it would cost 18.5 or 19 million to renovate Roosevelt to keep it an elementary school, but only 1.5 to 3 million to change it into a 4K. I guess I don't understand the discrepancy. If the facilities are in such need, why, I don't know if this is an answerable question tonight, but to me, those numbers, and as a taxpayer, I kind of feel like, oh, you're like, here's a low number that you're, you know, oh, it'll only cost this, and then we buy into that, and then I feel that the number could creep up, or that doesn't make sense to me. If the building needs that much work, it needs that much work, regardless of what children are in it, because I don't think that we want to house our 4K students either in a building that's not safe and doesn't have an adequate roof. And so that's question, answerable, not answerable?
I don't think right now.
Okay, and then, shoot, I forgot my other, oh, has anybody, you mentioned Little Red. And, yeah, that you're right, that's still something in community that I hear about. Has that been considered as a possible site for 4K education? It's been considered, and oh, nodding, okay. So, all right. So that's my second question.
Okay, thank you. We'll make it, we have to kind of make it a point to not necessarily answer all of the questions right now. If it's a really quick answer, we'll do that, but otherwise, it's something that we'll make sure is provided through other communication means or on the website later on, just because otherwise we'd be here until 2 a.m. So, no, but yeah, next.
My name is Kelly Ballard. I live at 325 Long Street, and I just have a couple of questions that maybe I just missed, or they, at least in my mind, need clarification. I'm a teacher at Lakeshore Elementary, and I live very close to Roosevelt, so I drive between the two. And if I'm looking at this correctly, it looks like my own children from my house will be going to school farther away than the school at which I teach presently. If they end up going to Longfellow, or if they end up going to Locust Lane. So they will be busing through the Lakeshore area in order to get to Locust Lane. So are we talking about a displacement of just the students who are currently in Roosevelt, or are we talking about kind of a wave chain reaction as far as trying to get the Roosevelt students a little bit closer to home? That's one question, and I hope I worded it okay. Another one impacts those students who do end up going to Locust Lane, if that is indeed the path. Then will they still be on track to go to DeLong, or will they go to North Star Middle School? Because that's also kind of a significant difference for those students as they make peer relationships. And then my last question was, I believe that in the presentation, which was very nicely done, the counts that we had for percentage of capacity was from last year. So I'm wondering if we could get, now that we're past Third Friday, I know it just happened, could we get like a more, I guess, up-to-date version of that, unless I interpreted that wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shayna Schmidt. I have another couple of questions. I also had the same question about the considerations of a different site for a 4K, whether the committee seriously considered putting a different 4K site on the south side of town, or at least on a different side of town than Prairie Ridge, because Roosevelt is literally a mile away from Prairie Ridge. So to me, that wouldn't address some of the issues of having kids from the south side or the east side of town busing for 20 minutes over to Prairie Ridge. And I have a daughter at Prairie Ridge right now, and it's an amazing facility, but I don't really see the benefit of having another 4K site right down the street. My other question is, as Roosevelt families have been talking about this and preparing for this kind of recommendation, we are wondering about the committee's meetings and their minutes that have been posted to the website. We're a little confused about some of the minutes that are out there, and whether everybody on the committee was in attendance when the vote was made, and whether you had reached a quorum, and if it was all the committee members that were necessary, I guess. So I'm assuming that somebody could answer that question now. I'm not sure about the other.
No, but someone will follow up.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Megan Holman, 1727 West Mead Street. I'm assuming that by the time we finish these discussions, you will know my address by heart. First of all, I would like to point out that when the Demographic and Trends Committee recommended that Roosevelt have a new building in January of 2017, that vote passed with 81%. When they rescinded their vote, they passed that with 56%. That's a huge difference, to have 81% of their committee voting to recommend it to the board and only 56 rescinding it. Also, Mr. Lyons, I would disagree with you, and I would say that at least 5 out of your 12 committee members live within Meadowview's boundaries, and to me, that's a conflict of interest, since we're talking about a South Side
And
school.
just to remind you, this section is for questions or clarification.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. It's not a second public forum.
Gotcha.
Section.
Okay, moving on. I would like to know why the district has waited so long to make improvements to Roosevelt, why it is in the condition that it is. I would also like to point out that we do not have a literacy coach at Roosevelt like was stated in the presentation. I think it's also imperative to mention that there are more children that are in Roosevelt's boundaries than are being included, because each year the district asks incoming kindergartners to go to Sherman School instead. And so it's a parent's choice, and they are recommended to go there because of space issues. So I think that that needs to be considered when you're saying 93%. It's actually a higher percentage within Roosevelt's district. Besides closing Roosevelt, what other ideas is the committee or the board considering to alleviate the overcrowding on the south side? If overcrowding is an issue on the south side, why isn't the district looking into using Little Red to address this problem, rather than pursuing a charter nature school for 150 middle schoolers? We don't have an issue with space in our 3 middle schools, so let's address the issues at the elementary level before we look at adding another charter school or a Spanish immersion school. I think it's important that the board commit to a long-term commitment instead of a Band-Aid fix that will need to be ripped off in a couple of years. So I would implore the board to, instead of being continually reactive, committing to being proactive to the growth that is occurring on the northwest side.
Is there anyone else with questions or areas for clarification?
Ben Holman, 1727 West Mead Street. My question is about the capacity numbers and equity in other aspects of the school. So for example, cafeteria sizes and gymnasium sizes, the number of students that can attend events. And I want to understand how the elementary schools compare. Not just how many seats are in each classroom, but the quality of the other facilities that are really capacity issues. At Roosevelt, they're rather small, and I've been amazed at the quality of the other elementary schools when I've gone to visit for other events. So I'd like to have a better representation in our numbers of the overall capacity of the school, and not just chairs. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Thank you very much, and there will be much more about this. Now we will move on to our update from the OPEB listening sessions. Ms. Johnson.
All right, on to another super fun topic tonight is my update on the other post-employment benefits update for the school board. As you know, we've been talking about updates for OPEB for a very long time, and in April we started our first series of presentations that had the proposals that Budget Development Committee had wanted to bring to the full board. So I last reported to the board on July 23rd about the updates from our summer listening sessions, and tonight my goal is to give you some feedback from the fall listening sessions. So you can see that we held 5 listening sessions this fall, and the attendance is listed up there on the screen. And I wanted to share a couple of the slides that were shared at the fall listening sessions. And this is kind of a reminder for the board as well, as the three options that we're looking at. And so you can see that we did list out the current benefits, and so somebody could compare what their actual benefits are today compared to the proposals that are on the table. In addition, there's a slide in the presentations from the fall that shows you step by step how to calculate your current benefits. So under the sample benefits for a single plan, you can see this person is an employee that has age 51 and has 26 years of service with the Eau Claire School District. And so their current benefits are valued at $79,920. If they look at, if the board were to choose option A scenario A option, or tier 2, and that person wouldn't retire by the grandfather period in scenario A, those benefits would increase to $146,250. And in addition, they would get $2,500 per year worked each additional year after that. If they were a certified staff member, $800 per year worked up to a $25,000 maximum if they're an administrator, and $500 additional year worked up to a $15,000 maximum if I'm a hourly employee. Then you can see in scenario A, this person is currently not eligible for the Tier 1 benefits, the grandfather, because they wouldn't meet the age requirement by the June 30, 2021 date that was proposed in the original presentation back in April. You can see their Tier 2 benefits changes to $130,000, and then Tier 3 is the same. If we look at scenario C, just a reminder for the board that that's calculated on $2,500 per year of service, so $65,000 would be scenario C. Tier 1 and 2 benefits, plus then that Tier 3 contribution is the same based upon employee classification. If we look at the Employee Plus plan, again, you can see the only number that's different from the slide I just reviewed with you is that the current benefits under scenario A have now changed to $169,296. And as a refresher for the board, that's because this current OPEB plan is based upon the current health and dental plan that is in place when an employee retires. All the other numbers on this are the same, and that's because we're using the same person with the same age and the same number of years of service. And then if we look at the difference for a family plan, you can again see scenario A, the current value of that benefit is $206,542.80. All of the other numbers are the same. And so I guess I just want to address the fact that we're not being transparent. We listened to the things that were told at the listening sessions, and we continually updated the presentation from listening session to listening session. And so, you know, if it's the board's desire for the committee to redo all of the 652 letters that we did this summer to add Tier 1, we would be happy to do that, but we would need some additional board direction on that. Historically, OPEB has been excuse me, it has been a big part of the budget under the benefits piece. And so there's been a lot of conversation that the OPEB costs have been flat historically for the last several years. And so I went back to 2013-14 to kind of see what that looks like. And you can see in 2013-14 that OPEB actual costs were $6.9 million. 14-15 it was $6.7 million. 15-16 $6.3, 16-17 $6. 17-18 the actuals was 5.8, and now you can see in our preliminary budget for 18-19 that cost is now 6.7, and that's an increase of $882,353. And that is really one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, is because that fluctuation, it's based upon the people that have retired and based upon the current health and dental plans that they have. Another thing that I want the board to remember is that the other post-employment benefit is in addition to what an employee receives from the Wisconsin retirement system. And I think sometimes that gets forgotten and lost. And so we felt it was important to highlight that the Eau Claire School District benefit is in addition to what they're receiving from the state. Let's talk about some of the common themes at the listening sessions. Very common to hear that these plans are forcing employees out. And that's referring to the grandfather timeline of looking at a 5-year grandfather or a 3-year grandfather. A promised benefit, and that the district is breaking trust. I'm sure you heard it tonight during the public comment, the word promised. I counted it at least 10 times in the public comment, and that was very usual what we heard at the listening sessions, that this is a promised benefit and the district is breaking the trust. Employees feel that upon signing a yearly contract that they are promised this benefit. And then another common question was, if the board makes a change now, how do we know this won't be reviewed again? And our response was, we don't know this because future school boards could choose to revisit the topic. Another common question was, is this legal? And our answer was yes, because only base wages can be negotiated since Act 10. Again, the question was, is this necessary? Is there a change that really needs to happen? And part of it comes back to the unsustainability and the unpredictability of the health insurance premiums, and what's creating that fluctuating in that financial liability to the district. Some more common themes were, why doesn't the district put the Tier 3 contribution in the account each year? And what that's referring to is that an employee hired after 2008, 2010, or 2012 received their contribution every year, and it can earn interest each year that money sits in there for them. And they do have to retire in order to have access to those funds. I shared each time that question came up that the Budget Development Committee did review this as an option, but we couldn't afford the additional cost to make it sustainable. And we looked at that as one of the very first options because we wanted Tier 3 to mirror what our current employees receive. Commissioner Harder?
Can I just clarify that? So the additional cost meaning, I assume, just, if I'm remembering correctly, the timing of the cost and when it would have to be paid. It has to be paid much sooner if it's invested, right? Yeah.
Yep, that's exactly correct. We looked at year by year if we started contributing that Tier 3 contribution immediately, and there was some pretty significant budget impacts. I think it ranged from $1.5 to $2 million in the first year alone for that. Another common question was, why aren't the Tier 3 proposed contributions equal regardless of the classification? And so I showed that to you in the early slides. The Tier 3 contributions were different based upon employee groups. And so to refresh your memory, the certified staff received $2,500 per year with no limits. An administrator receives $800 per year with a $25,000 limit. And an hourly and non-affiliated employees would receive $500 per year with a $15,000 limit. Again, the question, why is change necessary? And our response was, the current plan is unsustainable. Some more, excuse me, some more common themes are, why doesn't the district cap which plan a person retires with? That was something that we did look at as far as budget development went in the early stages, but the overall savings did not meet budget development's goal. And it was still tied to those unpredictable health and dental premiums. Why doesn't the district cap the yearly increase to eliminate that unpredictability of health insurance costs? And that was reviewed early on as well, and the overall savings by capping that at like a 3 or a 5% didn't meet budget development's goals for modifying a plan. Some more common themes are, what about the election? There's a belief that a change in leadership would result in more funds for schools. What does ECSD have planned for mass exiting of staff? And that's really referring to the grandfather clause, and if people have to make a choice and decide to retire, how does that impact our current staff? Why are we making a decision so close to the election? The discussion started in 2012, and these changes were proposed in April of 2018. The election was not on our mind when we were working through that proposal. How is the school board getting the information from the listening sessions? And I think everyone knows that written information was provided to the school board on October 5th, and that was a summary of all of the questions from each of the listening sessions. Probably the last really common question that we received are, how many people would fall into the grandfather category? So this was a complicated number for us to get, and so the numbers shown here are based on who would meet the age requirement in the next 5 years. That was something that we could pull very quickly. The other questions of years of service were more complicated because we have to look at in-district years and out-of-district years, and so we were going to refer the actuary for those exact numbers. But to give the board an idea of how many people would fall into those categories, we looked at if, excuse me, if there was a 5-year grandfather, and so that's why we started with age 50 and over. You could see there would be 347 people impacted. 40 to 49, 148 people impacted. 40 to 44, 101 people. 39 and under, 59. So as you can see, it's approximately 655 employees that were hired prior to that 8, 10, or 12 date and would meet the age requirement in the next 5 years. And again, that's just the age requirement. They still would need to meet the years of service. You guys rock. Thank you so much. Thanks, team. So the most common opinion that was shared from the listening sessions was no change. And I think that is well represented from what we heard from public comment tonight as well. Some additional information was that we had several ECAE members attending the listening sessions, and they alleged that administration wouldn't provide school board with accurate information. They contacted school board members to propose scenarios previously considered and declined by budget development. And they've also asked school board members to delay the December 2018 proposed vote. Once again, I remind you that the message from staff is loud and clear that they don't want any changes to OPEB. And I remind you that there are significant budget consequences. For the 18-19 preliminary budget, which I'll provide an update a little bit later tonight, you can see the impact just for this year's budget is an additional $880,000. In order for no changes to be made or changes to have an impact to our budget, because 78% of our budget is in salaries and fringes, we have to look at that salary and fringe piece to make an impact to our bottom line. So I would ask the board, if they're not going to make any changes, then what are the trade-offs that the board is willing to choose? And again, very difficult decisions, and I recognize that, but when we look at that big number of salary and fringe, in order to make an impact to our budget, what's going to give? And so some of the examples that we talked about briefly at budget development were, do you go back to implementing a salary freeze? I know nobody wants to do that because the salary increases are a cost of doing business. We've been talking about that for several years with our new salary schedule. Do we look at increased class sizes? Do we look at less staff across the board? Do we ask employees to contribute more to their health insurance? Do we increase the health insurance deductibles? And again, just the board really needs to be aware that there's a trade-off if there isn't something done to this. And I'm not saying that just a change to OPEB will fix our budget issue, because it won't, but that's one piece of it. And that's why we've been looking at it. When I talk about health insurance, I found when I looked at our health insurance costs, that's almost 46% of our employee benefit line of our budget alone. And so when you start thinking about that health insurance and how does that impact this financial liability for OPEB, it's a very big piece, and it makes sense to why there's such fluctuation on that. So I remind you to think about our dollar in our budget, and 78 cents of every dollar is spent on salary and fringe. 16 cents of every dollar is spent on our contracted services. That's going to include operating things like our electricity and our busing service, our contracted service, our contracted transportation, as well as the support we provide for those private schools. We spend about 4 cents of every dollar on supplies. We spend a penny on capital and equipment, and a penny on insurance, debt, and other. So I'd like to open up the floor for discussion for you to discuss what our next steps are, and is there going to be a vote in December of 28? And if not, then what would be our next steps on this project? So I'm going to open it up to you for questions and discussion.
Thank you for the update. I first want to thank you, Abby, and Marissa for being at all of the sessions, and I know board members did our best to be at as many as we could, and you were just doing what the board asked you to do, speaking to them on this, so I understand you had to put up with certain things that were said to you or about you at different times, and that wasn't fair, so I want to apologize to you for that. Just so folks know, there was the concern that we were not going to be given accurate information about the listening sessions. I don't know where that came from. I don't know where that originated. I spent the weekend reading all of the questions, all of the feedback from the listening sessions, every single one in detail. Some of them were several paragraphs in one bullet item that someone had said. They wrote everything down. I counted 365, and then I stopped counting. So anyone who thinks that they're hiding information from us, knock it off. At the end of the day, though, when we talk about the savings with OPEB, it's over 30 years. So dividing it, is it about $1.6 million?
If it was spread equally amongst the 30 years, it would be 1.6. It doesn't work out quite that way, because there's, you know, some peaks and valleys, and it takes us a while to get to that 1.6.
So, and obviously the percentage of the budget that is related to those costs will most likely decrease year to year in terms of the overall budget, and that number will just decrease year to year. And we wouldn't see, in doing this, we would not see savings for 8 to 10 years. So, for me, it raises a fundamental question about the direction that we take as a school district. And it, in the past, and it was listed on there, options that the district has. Options of cuts, cutbacks, slimming things down. And that has been the response of our district since 1993. When we're faced with challenges, we're going to have to cut. We retreat in some fashion, in some way, whether it's programmatically or whatever. And I think that we need to think seriously about the consideration of stimulus. And I'll use the example of when President Obama came into office and pushed the ARA, the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, for our country. New innovative programming and ideas that provided stimulus for our country and saved us from perhaps a Great Depression like we would not have seen since the 1930s. The biggest challenge that I see right off the bat, and as far as our budget is concerned, because these issues are intertwined, is the net loss that we have every single year from open enrollment. Every single year there's a net loss, and that costs our district a lot of money. Now, the $1.6 million, you take that in a snapshot in 1 year. If you just look at that one issue alone of how can we as a system help make the open enrollment issue just balanced or a net gain, okay? If we look at that as just one issue, that could potentially, if we incorporated new programming, that could be a $1.6 million price tag right there. That's not including all of the other things on the list that's been put together of innovative ideas that our district could pursue. Now, I'm one person, I'm one board member, and if push comes to shove, and at the end of the day we move in this direction, and that's the will of the board and the majority of the board, I would accept that. But I think that we have to, I think we owe it to our staff to try a different way, because we haven't tried it before. We have not tried it before. We have to try it, in my opinion. I would never be able to forgive myself if I voted to do something like this without being able to, at least first, explore some different directions that could generate revenue for the district and could make up this $1.6 million number. Ultimately, that's a fundamentally different discussion than the one on this agenda tonight. We're just here, we're talking about the specifics of this proposal. December 2018 vote, question mark. Maybe. I would also, though, want us as a board, when we're discussing decisions on this, to be in tandem discussing new revenue streams for the district, ways that we can make up the difference in issues like the open enrollment net loss. I think that we owe it to our system to do that. And so I'm not saying that we shouldn't continue to consider these plans, because they are just that. They're options for our district to move in. And but I think that there's more out there. And so I know that's kind of a far out thing to say, but that's where my heart is at with this. And I hope that as we discuss this and as we discuss looking at these topics as a district of OPEB, that we can also look at that at the same time. It's just where I'm at, and I apologize but for putting my heart on my sleeve. But Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle.
I want to comment too, because these have been tough conversations to have, and I want to put another perspective out there because it was asked a lot with the upcoming elections. And I'm really close to the budget and what's happening statewide relative to some of the options that are out there for the upcoming biennium budget. When I first got on the board, we worked really hard to bring the Wisconsin Public Education Network here to Eau Claire so board members could participate in that process and see what this group could offer as far as support to public schools. We were one of the first districts in the state of Wisconsin to become a full-fledged member of the WPEN, which I give our district a lot of credit for. So we have been at the forefront of these conversations for the last 6 years relative to when our budget started to, where we knew we went out to referendum. We knew that wasn't going to allow us to thrive, but we had to pass referendum. I want to bring up where we would be if we hadn't passed that referendum right now would be catastrophic. And so we have to put this all in a perspective. Recently, the Wisconsin Public Education Network and the Wisconsin Association of School Boards were both invited to the Department of Public Instruction in their conversation for their upcoming budget requests from the biennium budget. And you've seen us do some resolutions relative to a 90% funding ask for special education, since that is the level at which they are funding vouchers in special education scholarships within our private school partners. So we were just asking just for that same equity. So what came out of the conversations, and the Department of Public Instruction just told us, I was at a meeting with the WPEN, they said they will never operate again in isolation relative to their state budget. They will invite WASB, they will invite WPEN, and the people that are advocating for public schools in when they put their budgets together. So that's a really hopeful thing. And so they aren't advocating for 90%, even though our resolution in many districts across the state of Wisconsin are putting that resolution out there so that our legislators and people know that we're aware of all of this. I had Abby look at what it would, right now I think the DPI budget is advocating 30% the first year of the biennium, 30% the first year of the biennium budget and 60% the second. And as WPEN members in the room, as they brought this up, we're all going 90, 90, but this is what they're bringing forward. And Abby did some figures for me to see what that would impact as far as our budget goes, meaning there are other options out there that we have to advocate for so that we are equitably funded. I mean, we're doing this within in a situation that is really difficult. We're still not at the state average per pupil, correct? What are we now? It was 200 something. I know, I'm asking.
You're putting me on the spot.
I'm sorry, then don't tell me, but it is, we're not at average.
We're not at average.
And it's about $200 below again. I
don't think we've quite reached 200,
Well,
but
Okay.
yeah.
But even just taking into consideration 30% of our expenses, the 1920 estimate for that would be an additional $1 million. And the second year of that would be on 60% would give our budget another almost $6.5 million. So you can see the impact that this will have on our budget given what happens in the upcoming election. So just wanted to kind of put that out there so people are aware, and you can have these kinds of conversations with your neighbors and people that really want to understand what we're up against. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Vu.
First of all, thank you for the presentation. It's a very, very tough decision to make, gathering information so that we can make decisions that are very well informed. So thank you for doing that. And for all the patience and all the energy that people put into listening sessions. I knew that through listening session, either we change the recommendations or not follow through with the recommendations. Thinking long and hard on this, I believe we are tackling a issue that is national issue, state issue at the local tool. And that really hits people in the heart. I don't think we can resolve this situation without not looking into what you suggest. A is to increase class size. B is to reduce in staff, and on for 2 or 3 more recommendations. I would lean toward not letting the federal or the state make the local come up with a tool that fix issues that occur at the top level. I would rather see that we have bigger class size. That's national issue. I would rather see that we have less staff, but quality staff. Again, we don't want to eat less because there's not enough money. We learn to not give too many births, not too many mouths to feed when there are limited resources. So we cannot change our eating because there's not enough money. But we learn to give less birth when there are not enough food on the table. So I hate to see that we limit our staff creativity, energy, and resource by not feeding them. One more thing. What we are talking about is health insurance and dental. Those are almost the basic need to human consumption. It's similar to asking people not to eat.
Do any other board members have discussion about this? Further discussion? Commissioner Harder.
Well, I just want to reiterate thanks to Ms. Johnson for you and your team's work. I've been there for some of it, not all of it. And I know how hard you've worked with your team to come up with options that could help solve a very difficult budget problem that we have in the district here. And I really appreciate that. I also wanted to say that, I'm just going back and reminding myself on the budget committee what we talked about as guiding principles for this, and sustainable, equitable, valuing retention. I don't have to tell you. I know you have it very well memorized. And I think we've certainly moved closer to sustainable with this plan. I think it's on the point of equitable, and especially on the point of valuing retention, that it gives me pause, especially after having gone through the listening sessions and hearing the reaction. I'm concerned that we may need to continue this discussion a little bit longer to see if we can at least make the case that, I guess what I'm interested in doing is hearing if there are alternatives to this, that we've given every opportunity for those alternatives to be put forward and to be spoken to and put aside if they have reasons to be put aside. And I just feel like as a district, we're not quite there yet. So much as it pains me, because we've had this discussion and it's taken a lot of my time and taken a lot of the committee's time to talk about a delay, that's where I'm leaning at the moment. And that's, again, as President Luginbill said, that's one board member's opinion, but it is, that is mine at the moment.
I think one aspect of that too is placing it in the broader context. We will know in the first week of November who our governor is going to be over the next 4 years. That will have control over 2 state budget processes. And so that will be huge. The other piece looking at this is we just appointed tonight Revenue Committee, one of the only school district revenue committees in the state right now. That's why it was picked up by Wisconsin Public Radio. I have a lot of hope and faith in what that group could look at. And in leveraging the connections that board members and administrators have already and the reputations that many have, and in pursuing some bold things that could put us in a fundamentally different position as a school district strategically and operationally. So I think that having both of those pieces in this, in the atmosphere, I think that it's only prudent for us to be considering those things in tandem. If we're able to have full knowledge and awareness of where all of those things are sitting by December, then I would say we could move forward, but I'm not sure if we will. And I think that to make a decision as big as this one, which we're going to need to make a decision on it, but to make a decision as big as this, I think that we need to have every tool at our disposal, and every fact and every figure and every piece of knowledge that we need to make the best possible decision for our people, for our staff. So I would also support moving the date that we would make a decision on it to allow for those 2 other considerations to be a part of the process. I don't anticipate that would be a very long wait after that, but I think it would be a wait nonetheless. And I think that it I don't want to send Ms. Johnson out to different schools in the meantime and have to hold more sessions, because I think that what she's gathered for us is substantial, and I think that what we have before us are solid proposals. But I think that we kind of need to put, at this point, a bit of a pause on it while we consider those other factors that could greatly impact this decision.
Can I ask for 2 clarifying questions?
Yes.
Commissioner Harder, you talked about more alternatives, so do you have particular things in mind?
I don't, but I have a very strong sense, and more than a sense, I have, we see emails with people with alternate suggestions that I think you referenced in here that some of them have been explored, which I agree with. They've been explored and rejected. I think there are some that maybe haven't, and I just want to make sure we've gone through that process of enumerating those alternatives and offering the chance from our staff to help us to enumerate those alternatives. But also, as Commissioner Vu was saying, just broaden the whole picture out and look across, I think you listed some also rather unsavory options for alternatives here, which are freezes, class size, etc. But also to broaden and look at those in a holistic sense.
One other question, this just goes back to public comment. the public comment was asked that staff weren't provided with their current individual benefits. And so I'm wondering if the board wants us to do that or not. I guess I just would like some feedback.
I'll give you my take on it. I understand why it's being requested. However, I would not ask of your office to do that right now. I don't think that we're at that point.
Can we reiterate that there is a tool for calculating it? It's accurate as far as we know. It does work. It's on the.
It's not a tool. You have to go to the presentation, but there's a slide with step-by-step on how to calculate it.
Okay. So perhaps that could be.
It's been in the district update
Yeah.
for multiple weeks.
Okay. So that's just for public information. People can check that out.
Yeah, I mean, and if people have issues calculating it, we can certainly help with that. In many of the presentations you saw as a sample tonight, you know, the biggest question, the biggest question was, you know, what does my current benefit look like? And so, you know, the current benefits are listed here, and it's not going to be, the current benefits are dependent upon if I have a single plan, employee plus plan, or a family plan. So essentially, the number they're looking for is even in my board presentation tonight as well. The only thing that isn't in this board presentation, but it's in the listening session one, would be the married couple benefit, and that does impact, you know, a handful of our employees, but we do have that spelled out for them as well, what that currently looks like. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other? Yeah, Commissioner Humbuck.
I've been to a lot of the listening sessions as well, and thank you, Abby and Marissa, for all the work you put into that. And I just went to the one at Memorial, and I think to give a bigger, broader picture as well, it's been repeatedly brought up some of the history that goes with salary, not just the benefits, but the salary, and that at times it's hard to pull them apart when you really get into when we used to negotiate and do collective bargaining. Many times people bargained more for the benefits than the salary, and so now we're looking at benefits versus, and I think that's a hard one to really think about equitably. And I do think, given the opportunity maybe to broaden that conversation and really get some of that stuff out there historically would help people to understand as well, and the full board to understand those nuances.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, so we'll revisit this at a later time. And again, on behalf of the board, I want to thank you for Ms. Johnson for all of your work on this, and for fielding a lot of difficult questions over the past several months. So thank you. Now is it you right away again for the budget, or are we doing referendum now? Referendum. Okay. And I believe we have Mr. Summerfield, who's been patiently waiting in the wings. Oh, I apologize. I believe that there is the opportunity for public comment on that. So if anyone does wish to speak, just raise your hand so that I don't see anyone. Okay. Bye. Okay, Mr. Summerfield, take it away.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Construction's winding down for the summer. We've had a busy construction season this summer, a lot of work going on, and thought I'd update you on where we're at on the various projects. So, starting back in 2016, the referendum passed. The referendum had a bunch of deferred maintenance projects. They included playgrounds, parking lot, paving, re-roof work, window and door replacement, secure entrances, ADA compliance, heating and plumbing upgrades, fire alarm system upgrades, and 6 miscellaneous projects. So this last summer for 2018 at Lakeshore Elementary, we upgraded the fire alarm system. We added a receiving area on the building. We re-roofed the entire building and did a secure entrance project there. Longfellow, we replaced the gym floor and we provided new accessibility to the gym level. Mans Elementary, again, fire alarm system upgrade, playground paving, the entire building was re-roofed, and the secure entrance project was implemented at the building. McKinley Charter School, the project is currently ongoing for an addition and a secure entrance. By the December Christmas break, we hope to transfer the students over. The old building, then the classroom area, we'll do the asbestos abatement. Once the frost is out of the ground, we'll do the demolition, and then there's a small corridor addition onto the gymnasium that'll be completed. The project will be cleaned up as far as site work and paving, and before next summer we hope to have that project totally finished. Memorial High School, we did a secure entrance project there, and we replaced the gym air handlers and did some tuck pointing. Montessori Charter School, did parking lot and playground paving there, re-roofing of the I believe it was 93 addition there. We did a secure entrance and a window replacement in the 3-story original structure of the building. North High School, we're finishing up right now the boiler and chiller replacement there. We did about $1 million of re-roof work again there this year. We renovated toilet rooms, locker room, shower area, and we did a window replacement there. North Star Middle School, we re-roofed the entire building and outbuilding.
Could I ask you, Larry, about the white roofs? Now, we get some sort of a credit. Was it a tax break or some sort of?
It's not a tax break. In our climate, we're sort of at the borderline between black roofs and white roofs as far as benefits.
Okay.
The white roof reflects a lot of the summer heat that would impact a black roof, so it reduces our cooling costs throughout the summer and creates a cooler indoor environment for the building from the radiant heat that occurs as well.
Okay.
So we've gone with a white roof because of that. It's a little more expensive than a black roof, but again, the recommendation is in our climate, we're right at the borderline, and they recommend a white roof. They do make a gray roof as a compromise, but there's only one manufacturer that has that roof, so we wouldn't be in a competitive bidding situation if we did that.
Oh, interesting. Well, there's your sustainability, Gwen. There's our one right there, the roofs, the white roofs.
Yeah.
Who other than the counselors and summer school students are using the building for the few months or something?
We've got community groups that
Athletics.
use the buildings in the summertime. We've got our summer school program and our staff that's doing maintenance, repair work, upgrade work to all the buildings throughout the summer. And Prairie Ridge, re-roof project there, re-roofing the entire building there as well. So, if we go back to the summer of 2017, we did the district office re-roof, Davie exterior doors, Lakeshore parking lot and playground, Locust Lane door replacement, Meadowview parking lot and playground paving, Memorial exterior doors, Memorial new boilers and chillers, Memorial sanitary line replacement, tuck pointing at Memorial, north parking lot paving and parking lot lights. In addition, we did exterior doors at North, re-roofing at North, North secure entrance, North Star fire alarm system upgrade, North Star parking lot paving, North Star secure entrances, Northwood exterior doors, Robbins re-roofing the phase 1, and Service Center re-roofing. for a total of just over $4.9 million last summer. The anticipated projects from this year with projected final costs: Lakeshore Fire Alarm System upgrade, Lakeshore Receiving Area, Lakeshore re-roof, Lakeshore Secure Entrance, Longfellow Accessibility, Longfellow Gym Floor Replacement, Mann's Fire Alarm System upgrade, Mann's Playground paving, Mann's re-roofing, Mann's Secure Entrance, McKinley Secure Entrance in addition, Memorial Gym Air Handlers and Secure Entrance, Memorial Tuck Pointing, Montessori parking lots and playground paving, Montessori re-roof, Montessori Secure Entrance, the window replacement at Montessori, the north boiler and chiller and electrical panel replacement, north re-roof, north toilet room, locker room remodeling, north window replacement, North Star re-roof, and Prairie Ridge re-roof, totaling just under $13.5 million for this last summer. So that then leads us to next year's projects with our estimated costs. At Davie, we'll be doing playground paving, secure entrance and receiving area, a window replacement project there, Flynn secure entrance. Locust Lane will be doing a boiler replacement, fire alarm system upgrade, secure entrance project. We'll be doing accessibility in the restroom there. Also parking lot and playground paving. At Meadowview, we'll be doing the secure entrance there and accessibility work to a toilet room. Memorial, we'll be doing an Arlington Wing unit ventilator replacement, a heating project. We'll be doing a window replacement. We'll be doing re-roof work at Memorial. Tuck pointing. Northwoods will be doing a fire alarm system upgrade. Northwoods parking lot and playground paving, secure entrance as well. Prairie Ridge will be looking at parking lot paving on the, I believe it's the northwest lot. Prairie Ridge, we've got the paving, we've got Prairie Ridge secure entrance, toilet room remodeling, and the last phase of the Robbins re-roof for just over $6.6 million. So when we put it all together, we've got our 17 costs, our 2018 anticipated costs, and the estimated cost for 2019 for a total of the $25 million deferred maintenance budget that was approved in the referendum. So with that, any questions?
Are there any questions? Oh, Commissioner Humble.
I don't have a question. I'm just speechless. That's an amazing list, and thank you. I have one question though, is as far as the secure entrances and our recent ability to write competitively for safety grants, those safety grants had no impact on the secure entrances. They were just for other things that we could use, right?
It was for safety, cameras, etc. None of the safety grant work supplemented the referendum projects.
That's what I thought. I wanted everybody to kind of know that, so thank you.
I may have missed, but the deferral maintenance did not or will not include Roosevelt in any item, correct?
Correct.
So our decision or no decision has in some way delayed your decision to do any maintenance. If we were to put a number that you would want it, how big of a number or what number are we looking at for Roosevelt?
Secure entrance project there, is my estimation, is probably around $180,000.
I just want to say thank you for this presentation, and to all of the Buildings and Grounds personnel, as well as the private contractors who've done all of this great work. And I think that I just want to raise a little awareness about there's so much to be proud of in these slides. And I think what I'm perhaps most proud that can happen in our district is with what's being done at McKinley Charter School. And the reason I say that is because for so many decades, McKinley was a forgotten school. And I think that for students who often feel like an afterthought already, to be in a building that felt like an afterthought sent such a disheartening message. And I think for them to, I was able to walk through it, and I think for them to be able to take pride in their building is huge. And I'm really glad that that was included and that the community supported that. So, but great work, and thank you. And are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this? Okay. Then we will move on to our final report of the night, which is a budget update.
So I'm back to talk about one of our favorite subjects, the budget. I just noticed this. It's actually October 8th, and so the presentation says October 2nd, but we all know we're here tonight. So I apologize for that. We expanded our presentation from budget development last week, and we just missed that minor detail. So we'll start off kind of again, I talked about this just a few minutes ago about the breakdown of how we spend a dollar in the Eau Claire School District. And so again, 78 cents of every dollar spent on salary and fringe, 16 cents is spent on contracted services, 4 cents is on supplies, a penny is on capital and equipment, and a penny is on insurance, debt, and other. And really tonight is to give you an update on where we currently are in the process. As a reminder, you know that our final recommended budget will not be seen until October 29th because we get a lot of information next Monday, and so the countdown is on. We're anxiously awaiting that, and I'll talk more about what we're still missing. And again, these percentages, they're going to vary every year based upon the priorities in our budget. Every year I can tell you, though, that our salary and fringe will be the biggest piece of our budget because we're a people industry. So for the month of October, we have lots and lots of things that are going on. We're still going through the ongoing budget reconciliation and reviewing where we think everything is going to end up. Tonight, obviously, I'm giving a preliminary report to the school board. On Sunday, there will be the preliminary budget notice published in the Leader Telegram. That's required by state statute, and it has to be 15 days before our budget adoption hearing. Then on Monday, we will receive our final number for state aid. That will help us calculate our final tax levy. It will help us calculate our final contracted transportation expense because our contract with Student Transit is based upon our revenue limit increase or decrease. We'll get our final private school voucher amount. Our third Friday count will be verified, and our summer school count will be verified. And then finally, on October 29th, we'll have a budget adoption hearing. So some of those things are, they're critical and they're big dollars when we talk about it. The revenue limit, that final number coming on October 15th, accounts for 90% of our revenue in our operating funds. So that really does have a major impact to our budget. When we talk about the things that are considerations when we're making budget decisions, one of our first questions is how does that impact our student achievement? Our second question is how does it impact equity in the universal curriculum we're trying to provide? How does it impact organizational efficiency? And finally, how does it impact our fiscal responsibility? In building the 2018-19 budget, there are several things that are unknown to us as we're going through this process and aren't finalized until October. And so our final 2017 student count was $11,289. In our budget that you have here tonight, we're using that student count as our estimate for our enrollment. I did just learn that our current 2018 student count is 11,319. And you have to remember that when DPI does our membership count for revenue limits, they're using a 3-year average. So you can see our student count is clearly going up, but we don't get the full benefit of that this first year because it's a 3-year average. And so in our preliminary 2018 budget, you can see that our 3-year average for our student count was 11,243, which is lower than what our final count was for 2017 and also lower for our current count. But that's because we have a low year that's going to be dropping off in a year. And so that average will come up in the next few years. All of my projections are based upon flat enrollment, though, so that way then we're not overestimating what our revenue would look like. A friendly reminder about our revenue limit, and this accounts for almost 90% of our operating revenue. And so just for our new board members, that the revenue limit works like a scale. So if DPI says you're going to get more state aid, that means our property taxes are going to go down. If our state aid goes down, then our property taxes go up. And so I like to use that level to kind of give you a visual as to what that would look like. In the budget that I'm presenting tonight, our revenue limit, you can see our actual last year ended about 52% for state aid and 48% for property taxes. Our current projected budget is 53% for state aid and 46% for property taxes. So you can see that's a little bit of a switch, and that's because our early projections are that we're going to have an increase on our state equalization aid. Because our revenue limit accounts for almost 90% of our operating revenue, I wanted to single that part out and just remind the board that when we look at our property tax and we look at our equalized aid, you can see in total the two of them, our projection is a $910,000 increase. That's just for those two items in our revenue limit. And going back to that scale picture that I just showed you, you can see that our equalized aid is projected to be $2.2 million higher, and that in turn brings our property taxes down. Now it's not dollar for dollar because there's some other things that factor into that as membership and things, but you can see that right now at this point in time we're projecting our property taxes to be $1.3 million lower. In my slides, hopefully you can see that in the preliminary budget column in the current differences that the numbers are blue and red and they're bolded, and that's because sorry, we're expecting those numbers to change with our final aid certification on October 15th. So I just wanted, again, another visual for the board to understand that we do anticipate several changes coming in the next 2 weeks. If we look at our revenue summary for operating funds in total, the revenue limit that I just showed you is a piece of that. And so you can tell that our local source, which is primarily made up of our property taxes, overall we're projecting a $1.4 million decrease in that for this current budget. Our interdistricts within Wisconsin, we're expecting about an $11,000 decrease. Those are going to be types of services that we're providing to other districts. The other thing that falls in there is our open enrollment in students coming up. And so our open enrollment students in this year is very comparable to our open enrollment students that came in last year. And so I think it was about a $3,000 difference when I looked at those two side by side. If we look at our intermediate source, those are things that are flowing through CSUS and mostly grants. And so the biggest piece of that is the Head Start grant. And that increase, if you'll remember, is mostly due to the fact that we're adding an additional 17 Head Start students this year. And so that's what's driving that number up this year. If we look at our state source, you can see our actuals in 2018 was $71.6 million, and our current projection is $76.2 million. So that's a net change of $4.6 million. So we know that $2.2 million is from that equalized aid. The additional $2 million is that additional per pupil that was guaranteed in year 2 of the biennium budget. Yes, a $204 per pupil. And so those are the two things that are combining for that $4.6 million number. Federal source, again, a decrease of $820,000. That's where we're at today. That's just our federal grants, and there will be some grants that come in and some things that will get finalized once after the budget is finalized. So that's where we're at today. And we look at other revenue. You can see our actual last year is $1.2 million. This year's $852,000. a difference of $384,000. That relates to the big E-rate project that we had. And so if you remember when we passed the referendum, we did a project to bring our own fiber into the Eau Claire School District. And that project was completed in 16-17, and we got the E-rate on that in 17-18. That was a one-time E-rate income, and so that's why that line has changed so significantly for the 18-19 year.
Abby, that most districts did that E-rate piece, and so they'll all be at that deficit this year, right?
I don't know if most districts did do that. At the same time, they had, each district is a little bit different, and we do receive E-rate on our projects every year. That was just a really big project that we did, and so, you have to incur the expense once and you get the rebate once. So based upon everything that I've shared with you so far about our revenue, you can see we're projecting about a $2 million increase in our operating revenue, which is about 1.5%. And again, just the numbers that are bigger and in different colors are bolded. That's because we expect those numbers to change. If we look at our projected operating expenses and where we're at today, our 2018 actual was $138.8 million. Our current preliminary budget shows $142.5. That's an increase of $3.7 million, and the difference is 2.72%. And again, I have the numbers bolded and highlighted because we're still expecting some changes with those numbers. Some examples of those changes would be in our contracted transportation. Our school voucher number will be coming in. So those are two of the most common ones. Then if we want to just talk about the individual categories of our budget, when we look at the salary and benefits piece, you can see we ended the year $106 million was our actual spend. Our preliminary budget's $110.8 million. It's an increase of $4.4 million. Again, those numbers are highlighted. We're still working through and asking some questions. Some of the things to also just that we've talked about is that we've had some additional needs in the special ed area. We've needed to add some staff in that area to meet IEP requirements. And so, that's going to be showing up in here as well. If we break out some of the bigger pieces of those categories specifically, when we look at our regular salary, you can tell that we ended our regular salary accounts $65.5 million. Our current budget is at just over $67 million. That's an increase of about $1.5 million. When we talk about the health insurance piece, our 17-18 actual was 17.6. Our current budget is $19 million. That's an increase of 1.4. And then if we add the OPEB factor in there, we talked about that earlier, that the operating fund increases $850,000. When I add all of those pieces just for salary and fringe, that 3.79 it's 3.79 out of just over a $4 million increase in expense. And so when we talk about the impact of salary and fringe on our budget, those three items just highlighted there show you how critical and how much of an impact that really does have on our budget. Then it was also important to remember how CPI increases impact that salary and fringe detail that I just showed you before. So a reminder, in the 2017-18 school year, there was base wage increases for salary and benefits worth $923,000, and that was a 1.26% of base wages that were given. And then in 18-19, there was another $192,000, which was a 0.25%. So those are cumulative because each year when those base wage increases, that new amount gets folded into that. And so we just wanted to make sure that we're very upfront in sharing with that, because each time that CPI increase is given, that increases base wages, and that just continues to go forward year after year after year. When we talk about purchase services, you can see our actual at the end of 2018 was $23.1 million, and our current budget is $23.5 million. It's a difference of $354,000. Currently, one of the things that I was going to say Dr. Hardebeck, Commissioner Luganbill talked about earlier tonight was the impact of our open enrollment out. And so our open enrollment out for the 2018-19 year is projected to be $537,000 more than what it was last year. So again, very much a very big impact to our budget. I do expect this number to change because we don't have our final voucher number yet. I've plugged in what our voucher number was last year to get an idea of what that would look like in our total operating budget. But again, that number comes on October 15th, and they really have no way to predict if it will be up or if it'll be down. When we talk about supplies, those are all of the things that are consumable and used on day-to-day across the district. And so last year we spent about $4.8 million, and in our preliminary budget we've got $5.3. It's a difference of about $500,000. The biggest difference in here is the iPad refresh that the board approved in July, and that was $735,000. And so you can see, even though we have $735,000 in iPads, but our difference is only $500,000, that means we've made reductions in other areas of the budget to offset, to get to just the $502,000 increase. And again, these numbers are bolded because there could be some changes coming before the final budget. When we talk about capital objects and equipment, you can see last year we spent about $2.9 million, and our current projection is $1.5 million. So that's a difference of $1.3 overall. And again, this is going to be primarily equipment that's requested for the district. I think we've got, buildings and grounds down to bare minimum. I think technology is down to bare minimum. The schools are reviewing their requests as well. So we really do strive to review that and make sure if there's other opportunities to solicit funding that we're doing that. One of the things that we talked about at budget development last week was utilizing the Public Schools Foundation to assist with some of those needs that we've got. Insurance. It's not very often that you get to stand up here and say that your insurance costs actually go down, but go down by $150,000. That's very exciting for us. We like to highlight this every year because that's a direct relationship with our workers' comp plan and the fact that we've been using the trifecta model and getting our employees back to work faster. And so our mod is coming down, and that has a direct reflection on the premiums. And so our workers' comp premium is $120,000 of that difference. And so it's fun to talk about because that's a really good thing. And I know a lot of our staff is working really hard at the HR department specifically to review that and make sure that we can kind of, control those costs where we have the ability to do so. Our debt retirement, that number is going to fluctuate every year, and it's not our long-term debt. This is our short-term cash flow borrowing that we issue every November. And so last year we spent $102,000. We're estimating about $87,000 this year, and that's really just a fluctuation from interest rates. And last year rates were up more than what we had projected in our original budget, and so we're hopeful this year. We are looking at a couple of options to maybe look to do some of that differently, and so that maybe coming to the board in the next month or so, because typically we would bring our cash flow borrowing forward in November. So so overall right now we've got a $15,000 estimated decrease in that area. And then our other objects, those are going to be our district dues and fees and our student entry fees specifically. And so our final actual last year was $250,000. Our preliminary budget's $211,000, a difference of $39,000. So one of the things that I wanted to just remind everybody is that with salary and fringe being, such a big percentage of our budget, we can make lots of changes to all of these other items, but the dollar amount is small in comparison to that big number. And so we can take out all of the equipment, or we can reduce supplies and other objects, but that doesn't always give us the solution that we're looking for. So when we put all of these things together, I wanted to highlight where we ended up last year, because last year when we adopted the budget, we had a $2.4 million projected deficit. We actually ended the year at a $1.6 million deficit, and so that's a difference of $817,000. It's very common for us to predict a deficit, just the way that schools are funded and everything to meet our needs. And so it is common for us to get to have a projected or an actual deficit less than what was projected. Our goal is to be within 1% of our operating budget at the end of the year, and I think we came pretty close at the end of 2018. So how does that compare to the 2019 preliminary budget? And so you can see that our revenue budget is up over $2 million, and when we put our operatings in there as well with those costs up $3.7 million, that's currently at a $3.3 million deficit where we're at today. It's a difference of $1.7 million. And I want to remind you of the earlier slide when we talk about salary and fringe and the health insurance cost and the OPEB cost and the increase in salary, that more than adds up to what our current deficit is right now. The other thing that I wanted to talk about with this slide was, Commissioner Hambuck-Boyle, you hit it earlier when we were talking about the OPEB, was our referendum. And we would be in much worse shape if we wouldn't have passed that referendum. And the board had a very tough decision to make back in August of 2016. And I pulled out my presentation because I wanted to see how close were we to projections and where were we at. And at that point in time, we were projecting a $3.9 million deficit. And that was before any changes to the new salary schedule. And so there was a lot of discussion at that board meeting to make a decision of what is the right amount to go to for referendum. And the board looked at options ranging from 64 cents for $1,000 of property value up to $1.25. And you said it earlier tonight that the decision was made at the referendum to make it pass and not to thrive. And so that the board landed on 95 cents. And so that does have a huge impact to our budget, but we knew that it wasn't going to solve all of our budget problems. And so I think it's important to recognize that and talk about that, because we're getting asked frequently, but you just passed this really big referendum. Why are you still predicting a deficit? What's going on? And so I just want to make it very clear that we knew back in August of 2016 when that referendum decision needed to be made, we knew that we would still likely be facing a deficit, even with the successful passing of a referendum.
Abby? And presently in this election, school districts across Wisconsin are going for $1.1 billion plus in referendum. It's the highest ever attempted in the state of Wisconsin. So you can see other districts are in the same boat. And I just want to emphasize you have to keep looking at that big picture. So hopefully it'll get fixed. I'm hopeful.
And as we talk about where we're currently at today, there's a lot of numbers that we don't have yet. And so a lot of those will be coming in on Monday. And so again, those numbers are bolded and highlighted because we know that they will change once we get that information from DPI on Monday. I think I just summarized this again. When we're talking about a $3.3 million deficit, 3.7 million worth of expenses are tied into that salary and fringe area. And so when you look at the difference between those two, the reductions are being made outside of the staff, and I think that just shows support for the strategic plan and the board's priorities that we've talked about. Some additional things that budget development wanted to discuss with the full board tonight were some recommendations and some things that we've been talking about for a very long time. And so in this budget, there is not any reduction to athletic fees. That has been talked about over the course of the last year. It's been brought up at several board meetings. Budget development started the work, and then we kind of had some additional things that we needed to get. And so we do definitely have some more work to do with that. And so in this budget that is here tonight, we left athletic fees the way that they are. And for the rest of the board, athletic fees generate about $250,000 of revenue for us on a given year. And so again, if we were to take that out and change that now, we'd have an additional $250,000 that we would need to try to figure out how are we going to fund that. Included in the budget that you see tonight was the half of year 2 for the mentor program. I know that there's been some conversations with the board. What does year 2 look like? We really want to fund it. How do we do that? And so based upon some discussions that we had last week, there was a recommendation to fund half of what that year two was. The total year two cost was about 88,000, and so there's 44,000 reflected in this preliminary budget. The other thing that we've been talking about for several months is the musical instruments. And I think the board is very aware that 2 years ago, we kind of wanted to get into a rotating plan of spending $150,000 each year to get our musical instruments up to where they need to be. We were able to do that the first year. We were not able to do it last year, and really questioning if we're able to do it this year. So Budget Development had a long discussion last week about what to do with that, and should we be utilizing the Eau Claire Public Schools Foundation to update the wish list? Is there some alternative sources of funding? And basically, Budget Development decided to put $50,000 into this budget to start that replacement of the musical instruments. And so that's currently in the version that you're looking at, but they would like to get input from the full board as to do they want that to stay, or is there something different that you would like us to do?
Okay, you opening it up for us right now?
I sure am.
Okay. Well, we can go around if folks have input. I think this is fine. These three are fine. We're at the very least, we're phasing things and we're keeping on track. We're not losing sight of these various pieces, but anyone else have? Commissioner Bika?
So as you may know, I'm a member of the Budget Development Committee, and I voted against this recommendation to pay half of the two-year, for the two-year mentor program. And after tonight's conversation about OPEB, I feel, I guess I feel even more strongly about that position to maintain the mentor program. And I know that the other members of the committee, you knew that I would be speaking to this point tonight. I trust that development staffs, I'm thinking about program integrity. It's a two-year program, and it was planned to follow that arc. And I trust that district staff, when they developed and executed the program, if a more modest, I trust they followed best practices. And if a smaller scale program would have been warranted, I believe that's what they would have planned. And so when we were considering this in the committee, I was operating from the mindset that if we need to find funds to support the mentor program, it would have to come from one of the other two available areas. What many of you have said tonight is we can think outside of that limitation. It's not just move from one area to another, but if you want to talk about generating revenue, I think this amount to keep the integrity of the program is insignificant. And I think 44,000 does not account for cost savings or what is gained from recruitment and retention of staff. And so I would urge us to very seriously consider fully funding that second year. And whether it's, the only other point that was made during the committee is that if we're thinking about only these three items, instruments are likely to be kind of the most, if you think of a target for donors, would be a really salient target for them. But I would urge us to reconsider that recommendation and fully fund the second year of the mentor program.
Okay, thank you. I think that's good logic. Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Oh, I had a similar question, but I think, Lori, you spoke to it pretty well. My question was, well, is that only half of the staff get to be in the mentor program, or they only get half time? And both of those things didn't make any sense to me. So I support your position of if it seems like it's, as you said, an insignificant amount of money, but the payoff in that program is much larger. So I support that position.
Maybe, I don't know if it would be Mr. Schmidt or if anyone else could speak to, it's not fewer people can be involved, but it is less time overall.
Correct.
And maybe
It would cut the
just
time in half.
Please speak to that.
Yeah, we would cut the time in half, and we would either finish the project halfway through the year or cut the time per month. Right now, they're allocated 8 hours per month. It would cut the time in half to 4.
Okay. on these other two, postpone athletic fee reduction conversation, pay 1/3, are either of those two, were those unanimous? Okay.
Well, I think the issue for me with the mentor program is it was presented to us as an either-or between the mentor program and the instruments.
Oh.
And to fully fund the mentor program or do the instruments, not both. And I think that's where I believe that's.
Yeah, the original proposal for the instruments was 150,000. And so by doing a third this year, a third following year, and a third the year after that, we would be able to, even out that as the need for instruments. And wouldn't be able to get them all, in 1 year. So it's kind of let's, keep a little bit of everything rather than doing away with one thing.
Yeah, and that's very much the kind of why I personally supported this recommendation, because not to question the value of the mentor program, but that let's try and keep all of these things moving along at some level.
Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle.
And that was the discussion I had as well, about the three moving things along. It was a hard conversation, though. I see where Laurie's coming from as well.
Yeah. Commissioner Vu?
I'm a little bit at loss. So we are looking at 3 possible recommendations, but then we have a whole of 3.5 million. How is this fitting the big picture?
So these 3 items were in your original board priorities. So we had the highly qualified staff, we had class size, and then we had a list of additional purchases or additional programs that we would want to put in place. You've already acted on the other priorities. These were the 3 remaining priorities. And we didn't have direction from the board in terms of how to budget for these priorities that you had set for us. So the proposal was to leave the athletic fee reduction, just leave the athletic fees as they are, because that would bring in $250,000 worth of revenue, to take the year 2 of the mentor program and half the time per month, rather than having 8 hours, having 4 hours per month for the mentors, and then to take a kind of an incremental approach to replacing the instruments with $50,000 for the next 3 years.
I guess it's also, if I can just mention the newly incoming participants of the mentor program for this year would be fully funded. That's not mentioned here, but that's already sort of considered settled. So this really only applies to those year 2 mentor participants.
Okay. Well, I think we just need to provide direction on the one piece, the year 2 mentor program, right? That's what you need to just know what to
No,
incorporate.
we need for all of these. Is it all
Okay.
right to postpone the athletic fees? Is it-
Right. I figured, we didn't have any discussion on the other 2, so it seems like there's consensus. Does anyone disagree with the first and third? Okay. So you have that. As far as the pay half of year 2 for the mentor program, I understand, I guess, both points. Would the limiting it to 4 hours, do people, in talking to the folks who carry out this program, would it impact the efficacy of it and ability of the board and of the district to determine whether to have it for year 3 and 4? Was that discussed?
There's not a plan to go past year 2. It was designed as a 2-year program. Traditionally, the program had been a 1-year program, and when it was redesigned, it was designed as a 2-year. So we'd have to look at the scope and then do some scaling right now there's currently a list of topics that are suggested to the mentors and mentees to discuss. We would simply scale those back.
Okay. Let's just do a little round robin. Will each member just tell us where you're at on it, and then we'll tally it up, and that'll give you an idea. So, Commissioner Hombuck-Boyle, we'll start with you.
I'm okay with the recommendation.
Okay?
From a perspective of program integrity, thinking about outcomes, assessing those outcomes, and that we've made a commitment to these mentees. I honestly don't know what it says to these new teachers to make a change halfway through a program that they've committed to.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Vu?
There are two things. I believe the committee's work to get them to the level that we're seeing right now. I mean, the three recommendations that are putting on the table, there were lots of discussion, lots of information that they heard, lots of thinking that they thought through. And for us to make a quick decision based on the lengthy time that they put into would not feel right. I'm compelled to go along with the recommendation as is, but at the same time, I'm saying that because there are not a alternative number 4 or number 5 to eliminate. So by default, I like the committee's work, and I know they had long debate and they have thought through, so I will go along with what's being recommended here.
Okay. I guess for me, I would oppose, I think, just ideologically, in talking through this as a group and in thinking through it, say, for example, we implement the Spanish immersion program and we commit to certain levels of funding for it, and then going into year 3 we scale it back. I would not feel comfortable with that. So I guess if we're just looking at ensuring that the second year of this is fully funded, and then going into year 3 of it, it'll be a blank slate determining what we're going to do, but at least for that second year there's a commitment again to maintain it. I guess I would support paying the full, also because it isn't a particularly high cost in the grand scheme of a budget this size. So and the main reason for that, again, for me, is just because I think that if the board, even if it isn't this current board, but if the board votes to implement something for a set period of time at a set level, that we ought to keep it at that level to allow for it to live its full life. So I would support paying the full. So I would say no to that recommendation. And Commissioner Torres, your turn.
I would agree with Dr. Bika. I think that we need to be consistent in the larger picture. It is really not that significant.
Right. Commissioner Harder?
Well, yeah, and I agree. It's kind of a rounding error compared to the whole budget.
Right.
In the discussion in the budget, though, maybe I may have misunderstood it, but it was kind of presented as an either-or, instruments versus fully funding versus half funding of the mentor program, and that's what we were really talking about. And to me, that was not a trade that I was comfortable with, and that's why I stick with what the recommendation is that I voted for before.
Is that accurate, though? How?
If it's not, someone correct me, please.
So you're looking at a 90,000. With the two items together, you're looking at an additional $94,000 to the budget, and you're with another $44,000 added on. It's 94 and 44 is 100.
Well, I think what we were looking at there is if we put it, what did we want to, if anything, for the instruments, which was 150,000 plus another 44,000, so we were talking almost 200,000 at that point in time. So I think it was presented as an either or because we weren't really sure, what the discussion was going to lead to, and another $200,000 is much different than a 40
or.
So you were basing it off of if the board were to have done the full instrument piece?
Correct.
It'd be 200,000.
Because that's what we had been talking
Yep.
about for several months.
All right.
So we're, I just want to clarify what we're voting on.
We're not voting right now, I'm just
Oh, all right.
we're just testing the waters.
What we're
so that-
testing the waters
so
on,
that,
exactly. What is the proposal? How
So
would we vote?
we're asking, do you support this recommendation to pay half of year 2, or do you not support that and want to pay the full amount?
Only on the line item, it doesn't impact line 3?
No.
Only talking about line 2?
You're just talking to pulling it out.
Changes our conversation.
That's a different conversation, yeah.
Did you have something to? Your light's on. Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make
Please
sure.
turn off.
Okay.
Could we push the instruments 1 year down?
I think they've already been pushed quite a bit.
Yeah,
That
they've
was
been
part of the
deferred a lot.
conversation as well. They've been really quite pushed, but,
May I
yeah,
ask
it's
a
an option.
question?
And then that's what it really came to, was that either or.
And one of the things I think for the board to keep in mind, these are your priorities. We just want direction on how to proceed on these priorities.
Right. Commissioner Klinkhammer, do you want to?
And I just do want to reiterate the appreciation of the time and the effort that you guys have put into considering these things. But I guess I would be in support of what Dr. Bika is saying, and that I do support funding the mentor program as it was originally intended. I think I understood it to be saying we are leaving the athletic fee and the instrument piece alone, those pass as you've recommended, but we're paying the full mentor program. That's my understanding. That's what I would be supportive of.
Thank you. Did you have?
Again, this committee meeting took place prior to tonight's discussion about OPEB. And from what several of you said, that opened up possibilities that were not realized at the time of this meeting. And I think it would be a significant contradiction
Right.
if we didn't apply those possibilities to this, if they're being applied to OPEB.
I agree. It's really a mindset. No, we don't. We don't.
Yes, you do, because we have to adopt.
No, we can't right now because it's a committee item. Because it's a committee report, so we can't make a motion right now. But we can at least provide the guidance if it's. Is this sufficient guidance for you to pay the full for the year 2?
I think we have an idea. Sorry, I turned my mic off. We have an idea of where you'd like to go. I think we would want to chat in the morning and see if it could be, like an individually considered item or on a consent agenda for the next budget meeting.
And that's fine, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that we
We
could.
can't vote on it right this minute. but
No.
Yeah.
Right, but I think at least we'll have a good idea of the direction, and we can
Okay.
figure out the details tomorrow.
All right.
Okay, thank you for that conversation.
Yep.
We're not quite done yet.
Oh,
But it gave me a break from talking, so thank you. So another way to look at our dollar, and obviously you're probably getting the theme that we're going to continue to talk about our dollar a lot. This one breaks it kind of down into the pennies and the change for us. The only difference is in that contracted services piece. And so if you remember at the beginning of my presentation, we spend 16 cents out of every dollar on our contracted services. One of the things that it's really important for us to recognize is half of a cent goes for our private school support. And that's going to be in contracted services, and that's going to be for our title allocation for them, our IDEA, and our pupil transportation. Some opportunities for us to have some more potential changes, and these are things that have kind of been identified since budget development last week. And so this is new for all of the board. And so as we are, pulling those final numbers together today and looking at a $3.3 million deficit, there were some things that potentially could have some reductions. And so we wanted to get an idea of some feedback again from the board tonight. And so those things really involve around really that professional development and curriculum writing. And so when we look at curriculum writing, that's really funds that we have set aside to support our staff in developing new programs. and things, and a lot of that work happens over the summer, but some of that does occur throughout the year. And so we've identified maybe some potential reductions there. Additional time, that's kind of across the board. When we look at the additional time requests in our operating budget, it exceeds $1 million. Now, a chunk of that is summer school, and so, you know, that doesn't go away because we've been working really hard to expand our summer school program. But there's some potential cost savings there if we were to make some changes. And then the other piece that we talked about was professional developments, and we wouldn't recommend reducing it all, but maybe just evaluating, can we bring trainers to us, or can we send less people to conferences, and what that might look like. So from a quick, when we were looking at it earlier, we identified maybe a potential of $700,000 that could be reduced, but wanted to get feedback from the board because this wasn't discussed at budget development, and Dr. Harderbeck wants to add.
So we've made series of reductions in supplies and equipment already in the teaching and learning department in terms of trying to offset the increases that we've had with the salary, the benefits, the CPI, all of the employee-related costs. If we were to make other changes, particularly with the additional time that's put in with curriculum writing, with collaboration time, that would be have a significant impact to the way that we do business in the district, and in the way that we've structured our PLCs and our leadership teams. But I think in terms of the budget work that staff has done, in terms of looking at those reductions, it's how much of a deficit can the district bear? And so we need some guidance in terms of whether or not to present the budget as we've presented it to you tonight, or to go back in and look for more reductions, and really have an impact, which would really have an impact and an influence on the way that we're able to do business in terms of collaboration, in terms of professional development, sending people for training, that kind of thing.
Commissioner
Everybody
Buckwell.
has heard. Oh, did you say me?
Yep.
Oh, sorry. Do we know at this point in time the approximate fund balance?
At the end of 17, 18? I have to think what year, man. Yeah, we're just over 25 million. Commissioner Harder?
I'd say let's keep talking about fund balance because that's the question. So what kind of can make sure we're all kind of on the same page in terms of trends over the last 5, maybe even 10 years in terms of fund balance going up and down, and also a little bit about impact if it gets too low, and what is that too low point in your opinion?
Sure. Well, ideally, the auditors recommend having fund balance between, I think the range is like 22 to 25% of your operating budget. We are very close to that, I would say, right now. Trending, we've had a few years that have been up and a few years that have been down, and I would say probably more years that have been down than up. We talked about it at budget development, I think, 2 meetings ago, I think, where we kind of looked historically at the last 10 years. I didn't think to put that in here. So I think it's something we need to be concerned about. Fund balance does impact our bond rating and the rates that we get as well. We get asked questions sometimes, what does your fund balance policy look like, and is that being reviewed, and how does that impact the discussion we're having right now? I think it's something that we're all very aware of. Can we afford a $3.3 million deficit? We're getting to a point where I'm very uncomfortable. I would say I think we're all uncomfortable even at 25 million, just because, for a district our size. I think that it's a struggle because there's so many things that are outside of our control, and so, you continue to have those discussions, but it's real when we get down to it at the end of the day. And so in a perfect world, we'd be teetering on 25% of our operating budget, which is, very different than 25 million. So I worry about that, and I know that most of the board does as well, so.
Commissioner Torres?
Oh, I think I left it on, but I'll take the opportunity. Well, I share the concern about the 25. It concerns me that we stop writing curriculum and support additional time to collaborate and support professional development, because that's our business. So where do we find how can we compromise to a point where we don't stop doing what we need to do?
I think we're all asking the same exact question. Because I think when we go back to, we can easily account for the $3.3 million deficit. When you look at the salary increases, the health insurance, and the OPEB, right there is more than what our projected deficit is. And so it's very tough decisions, and it will, if we do things different, like Dr. Hardebeck said, we will be doing business different. And is that what we want for the Eau Claire School District?
No,
I don't think so. Right?
Support that.
Okay.
Commissioner Humbuck-Boyle.
I just want to maybe leave on an up note, but this conversation was inevitable. It's inevitable for the I think it's $1.2 billion that school districts are asking their communities for coming November. That's a huge statement to our state relative to where we are with school funding. It doesn't help us in the sense of the conversation we're having now, but I find solace in numbers in the sense that that 1.2 billion sends a huge message relative to where most public schools are sitting right now. And so it's incumbent upon us to have those conversations with anybody that you can possibly have them with, so that maybe this will get fixed. And I'm not saying if it doesn't get fixed, we're going to have even tougher conversations. So thanks for your work on this, Abby.
So before we leave this, though, I do need some guidance from the board in terms of the increase in what we're looking at the 3.7 million.
Our current projected deficit is 3.3.
3.3. So looking at that 3.3, if we go into the fund balance, we are going in down to that, that mark, which is like less than 22. And I need to know what the board's comfort level is with that. Because we have reduced, I think, everything we could reduce without going into these things. So
I don't see that we have much of a choice. I mean, oh, go ahead, Commissioner Harder.
Have you quantified, and I'm sorry if I missed it, was it 700,000, the amount that this totaled, that you sort of thought you might be able to squeeze out from working with these?
Yes.
Was that the amount,
That's
700,000?
the correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I just needed to.
No,
remind
that's
myself
okay.
of that number.
Yeah, I don't see that we have much of a choice at this point. These are the core functions of our work as a school district. I think that it is, though, now is the time for our district to boldly look at what can we do systemically to bolster our position for revenue and finance, new operations, new programming, new services for students and families that will bring us dollars. And that has to be our agenda this coming year. We've done all the cutting we can do. We've gone to the state a heck of a lot. We need to look at this now too. So I personally feel like we don't have much of an option other than to just we need to do these things. It's our job. It ensures our sustainability as an organization and our viability as an organization. So, but it is crucial that a focus of our district this year is revenue.
And this conversation has been helpful. It's been helpful because I think it points out, you know, as we've talked about several times, that there are certain triggers for discussions with the board about budget and budgetary impacts. And so this will be, this budget will be very different than what we've had in the past in terms of a deficit. We started out well above the 5.5 million mark.
Right.
And we've cut. And, you know, we're going to have to do something to offset those salary and benefit
Right.
lines. It's just, it's inevitable.
I feel like for the first time in many, many years, we have a board and administrative team that is interested in going beyond the status quo. And people are on the same page about that. So I at least feel hopeful in that respect, that we can do some big things here. Commissioner Helmut-Quell.
Yeah, I just want to throw out there too, as a board member, it would be interesting for me, and I don't know, maybe the rest of the board members can weigh in on this. It would be important for me to get staff input through a survey or something as to these priorities too. You know, when you throw little pieces out like that, and when you look at their lives and members of our district for 20, 30 years, it might be kind of nice to have their input as well.
Commissioner Vu?
I want to echo with the previous suggestion. Perhaps, well, there are two things that I want to comment. I wonder to what extent starting with administrator all the way to staff, I wonder to what extent they have been aware of what is happening so that they are part of the solution and not just the problem. In other words, in a family situation, if you have overspending and you're the parents and you keep on cutting things and the children don't see how, or you come to where you are and then you end up, yeah, you do an efficient job by cutting money, but then you break apart the family. So I do strongly encourage that we solicit participation at the problem-solving level very well. The other comment I want to make is that perhaps cutting this curriculum or additional time of professional development can be seen as temporary fix only. The bigger way to fix the issue was through attrition over time. So once we're able to cut down that salary and fringe, I'm talking about maybe 3 to 5 years, 10 years from now, we will be able to come back with stronger curriculum and additional time of professional development. So yes, now we have to make the change based on those 3 items here, but look at the couple years down the road, we might be able to strengthen it again.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Okay, anyone from the audience?
I'm not quite done.
Oh, okay.
Oh, maybe I am. I lied. Questions?
Okay.
Is there anything that we haven't answered already?
It's a cute picture. Okay. No, I don't think so.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any requests for future agenda items? No? Okay. Seeing none, then I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.